Chapter 44-27. In the valley, everyone's eyes were focused on Nietian, waiting for his answer. Wind Demon was indeed using a borrowed knife to kill, but at the same time, he was also giving the Fengtian Fate sect a chance, albeit a slim one. I accept this battle. Nietian did not hesitate for too long. He slowly raised his head and said indifferently. As his words fell, everyone felt as if they were struck by lightning. They were dumbfounded and could not react for a long time. In everyone's eyes, Nietian's decision was very unwise. On the Gia sect's side, other than Yanqing, there were 3 other elders from the Gia sect. Although they were not as strong as Yanqing, they were definitely powerful. As for the Fengtian Fate sect, only Fan Zhong had the strength to fight. The others were too weak. Even if Nietian defeated Feng Kuan, he was still too weak in front of Yanqing and the others. If the Fengtian Fate sect master and the others were here, there might be a chance. But now there was no chance at all. After a moment of silence, Feng Yaoxing spoke, giving Nietian a chance to back out. Lord Beacon Emperor, have you really thought it through? Was there really a need for such a hopeless battle? Feng Yaoxing knew of Nietian's potential. He did not want to see such a genius fall just like this. Yes, I have, Nietian said with a smile, his face expressionless. Good. Wind Demon shouted. Lord Beacon Emperor is young, but your courage is unparalleled. I admire you. Nietian glanced at Wind Ghost Lingyun, a disdainful smile hanging at the corner of his mouth. How could he not see that Wind Demon was using a borrowed knife to kill? But he had to accept the challenge. If he did not accept the challenge, the Fengtian Fate sect and the Wind Demon's clan would definitely become mortal enemies. How could Wind Demon, Yanqing, and the others let Nietian leave so easily? Nietian accepted the challenge, but his opponents were only 3 from the Gia sect. If he didn't accept the challenge, his opponents would be the Gia sect and the Wind Demon's clan. Nietian naturally weighed the pros and cons of this matter very clearly. In his opinion, if he accepted the challenge, he would at least have a sliver of a chance. Very well. Beacon Emperor, you are courageous. How can I not accompany you with my life? Yanqing laughed out loud, extremely arrogant. What he meant was that he was one of the 3 representatives from Gia sect. In fact, Yanqing also saw through Wind Demon's intentions, but he didn't expect that Nietian would actually dare to accept the challenge. With such a powerful Beacon Emperor in the Fengtian Fate sect, they must not be allowed to live. Everyone, please follow me. Wind Ghost Lingyun's figure flashed and he led the way in front. Since it was a battle between 2 sects, they naturally had to find a suitable battlefield. Moments later, everyone arrived above a vast valley. Faction Leader Yen, Beacon Emperor, how about you 2 fight here? Wind Demon pointed at the valley below and smiled. His eyes glanced at Nietian as if he was choosing a grave for Nietian. That's right. Yanqing stepped out and landed. Nietian didn't say anything. He only nodded and landed as well. Everyone landed one after another. They all had different expressions, but their eyes were filled with a strange light. They were obviously looking forward to the upcoming battle. Sir Beacon Emperor, we have chosen our side. I, 3rd Elder and 4th Elder will fight. What about you guys? Yanqing sneered at Nietian as soon as he steadied himself, provoking him. Nietian's eyebrows furrowed as he made up his mind. The 3 from the Gia sect were the strongest on their side. On the Fengtian Fate sect's side, other than Fan Zhong, everyone else was young and had very few people. They didn't have much choice. The Wind Demon's clan looked at Yanqing with a strange expression. Though they didn't like Nietian, Yanqing was too shameless. He didn't give the Fengtian Fate sect any chance. This was normal. After all, this wasn't a simple battle. It was a battle that determined who the Wind Demon's clan belonged to. Sir Beacon Emperor, you still haven't made up your mind? Seeing that Nietian didn't speak, Yanqing spoke again. The sneer on his face was even more disdainful. Nietian ignored Yanqing. After thinking for a while, he finally made up his mind. He decided to let Fan Zhong, Tang 13, and himself fight. Wen Luan's capabilities weren't high to begin with. Though his life meridian was repaired, he was still too weak. Overall, Tang 13 was stronger. However, Nie Tian was worried that Tang 13 had the seed of the underworld inside her. If it activated during the battle, it would be troublesome. Just as Nie Tian was about to open his mouth, he suddenly sensed an extremely familiar aura, causing his expression to change. Since it's a battle between the Fengtian sect and the Gia sect, how about I join? Then, a familiar voice arose. A silhouette descended like a ghost and appeared in front of everyone. Everyone stared at the silhouette and their expressions changed. They didn't know who it was. It's you. Nie Tian stared at the person before him and his expression turned cold. He uttered the person's name, Devil's Knight. That's right. The person who suddenly appeared was none other than Devil's Knight. Devil's Knight was a demon born from Nie Tian's body. Nie Tian didn't expect Devil's Knight to appear at this moment. Who are you? Wind Demon noticed that Devil's Knight and Nie Tian's faces were very similar. The only difference was that Devil's Knight gave off a darker vibe. Wind Demon frowned and asked, Fengtian sect, Devil's Knight. Devil's Knight smiled faintly and introduced himself. Fengtian sect? Everyone's expression darkened as they looked at Devil's Knight strangely. Fengtian sect was the name of the Fengtian sect a long time ago. Later on, the Fengtian sect declined and its disciples practiced life technique. Hence, it became the Fengtian sect. It was strange that Devil's Knight said he was from the Fengtian sect. To be exact, it's the Fengtian Soul sect. Devil's Knight saw everyone's confusion and smiled again. Fengtian Soul sect? Everyone was stunned again. There had always been the Fengtian sect and the Fengtian Fate sect. Since when did the Fengtian Soul sect appear? Soul sect. Only Fan Zhong's expression changed, as if he thought of something. Looks like you know about the Fengtian Soul sect. Devil's Knight looked at Fan Zhong with an evil smile. Nie Tian, Wen Luan, and the others also looked at Fan Zhong. The latter clearly knew something. Yes. Fan Zhong was silent for a moment before he finally nodded and said, Rumor has it that when the Fengtian sect declined, it split into two, the Fengtian Fate sect and the Fengtian Soul sect. The Fengtian Fate sect cultivates fate techniques while the Fengtian Soul sect cultivates soul technique. However, the Fengtian Soul sect only existed for a short period of time before completely disappearing. Therefore, people think that the Fengtian Fate sect is the original Fengtian sect. At this point, Fan Zhong suddenly thought of something. He looked up at Devil's Knight and asked, What is your identity in the Fengtian Soul sect? The corner of Devil's Knight's mouth twitched. He smiled and softly said two words. Beacon Emperor. Chapter 44-28. Choking with sobs. Novel Beacon Emperor. When Devil's Knight said this name, everyone's expression changed. They stared at Devil's Knight in disbelief. Fan Zhong's expression was a little stunned. Although he had vaguely guessed Mo Ye's identity, he was still shocked when Mo Ye revealed his identity. Again a Beacon Emperor, the Beacon Emperor of Fengtian Hun sect. Nie Tian and Devil's Knight, Fengtian Hun sect and Fengtian Hun sect, two Beacon Emperors. Nie Tian looked at Devil's Knight. His eyes calmed down and a bitter smile hung on his face. Demon, the relationship between him and Knight was similar to the relationship between Hayakuten and Donghuang Jingrong. Only yes, Donghuang Jingrong was dead, but Hayakuten was still alive. Would history repeat itself on Nie Tian and Devil's Knight? Nie Tian already knew that there would be a fateful battle between him and Devil's Knight. However, he did not expect to meet Devil's Knight at this moment. Moreover, Devil's identity was surprisingly similar to his. Perhaps fate really existed in the unseen world. Nie Tian, who is this guy? Tang 13 stared at Devil's Knight for a long time. He felt a familiar aura from Devil's Knight. He was in disbelief and asked Devil's Knight telepathically. Demon Knight's appearance was similar to Nietion's. His aura was similar to Nietion's. Even his strength was shockingly similar. Their relationship was not ordinary. At first, Tang 13 thought that Devil's Knight was Nietion's twin brother. However, after thinking about it, Nietion did not have any brothers. He is my dark side, my inner demon. Nietion's eyes darkened and said telepathically, "Inner demon?" Tang 13's expression changed, but he did not ask any further. He could tell that the relationship between Nietion and Devil's Knight was more complicated than he thought. Nietion, before I came to the sacred world of 7 cultivators, I already knew that the Fire Beacon Heaven Fate sect had found a new Beacon Emperor. I just didn't expect that this Beacon Emperor would be you. The corners of Devil's Knight's mouth twitched into an evil arc. He looked at Nietion and said, "It seems that we can't hide from each other." The corners of Heaven's mouth twitched slightly as he said, "You came to the 7 cultivators of true virtue sacred world for the Wind Heaven Fate sect. Your goal isn't just to visit the Beacon Emperor of the Beacon Heaven Fate sect, right? There is bound to be reunion, and there is bound to be unification. The Feng Tian Soul School and the Feng Tian Fate School share the same origin. After being separated for so long, it's time for them to unite." A sharp light shot out from Devil's Knight's eyes as his body exuded a domineering aura. As expected, Nietion's eyes trembled and his heart sank. He had already guessed Devil's Knight's goal, but he was not sure. Since the latter had personally said it, it was naturally clear. Rather than saying that Devil's Knight came to unite the Fengtian sect, it would be more accurate to say that he wanted to annex the Fire Beacon Heaven Fate sect and establish a new Fengtian sect. You and I are both Beacon Emperors, so you should understand that the responsibility of the Beacon Emperor is to lead the sect to glory. Devil's Knight smiled again and said, "The reason why the Fengtian sect declined so quickly is because of the discord between the Soul School and the Fate School. As long as the Soul School and the Fate School unite, the Fengtian sect will definitely rise again." "You're right." Nietion's eyes trembled and revealed a hint of fierceness. He smiled and said, "I wonder if you are the Beacon Emperor of the new Fengtian sect, or am I the Beacon Emperor? The position of Beacon Emperor concerns the survival of the entire sect. Naturally, it will belong to the one who is capable." Devil's Knight smiled indifferently, his eyes filled with confidence. Very obviously, he was very confident that he could defeat Nietion. Nietion's mouth twitched, but he did not say anything. At that time, Dongwang Jingrong and Hayakuten won all 3 battles, but after each battle, Dongwang Jingrong felt more pressure. But this point was shockingly similar to Nietion and Devil's Knight. Very even Nietion and Devil's Knight had a similar arranged battle. Only did not know if Nietion could replicate Dongwang Jingrong's victory. Interesting. At this time, Ghost Cliff's vice-sect leader Yan Qing, who had been silent for a long time, spoke. He looked at Nietion and Devil's Knight with a strange gaze. He smiled and said, "So there is another Fengtian Soul sect other than Fengtian Fate sect. Looks like my Gia sect will have to face 2 sects at the same time today." Devil's Knight looked over and smiled. "Since this emperor is here, this battle no longer belongs to Fengtian Fate sect, but Fengtian sect. Sect leader Yen, this emperor is a representative of Fengtian sect. You don't have any objections, right?" "Of course." Yan Qing's lips twitched coldly, his eyes surging with undisguised killing intent. He had already sensed that Devil's Knight not only looked similar to Nietion, but also had the same cultivation, 9th level heaven tribulation. But Devil's Knight was the Beacon Emperor of Fengtian Soul sect. He would definitely be a big problem in the future. Just why not kill 2 Beacon Emperors of Fengtian sect in this battle? Devil's Knight faintly smiled and looked at Nietion. "Nietion, you and I will participate in the battle, and your follower will make up the numbers. Is that all right?" Follower, he was talking about Fan Zhong. In his words, Fan Zhong, who was originally the strongest, had become a dispensable person. I didn't expect this Beacon Emperor of Soul Sect to have such a big tone at such a young age. Yan Qing couldn't help but sneer. I just don't know if his strength is enough to support such a big tone. Sect leader Yan, since you doubt this emperor's strength, then why don't this emperor fight you? Devil's Knight looked at Yan Qing with a cold and confident gaze. Yan Qing frowned and his heart inexplicably trembled. Then he said in a cold tone, since the Beacon's emperor has spoken, how can I avoid the battle? In the face of such a provocation, if Yan Qing didn't fight, he would appear to be a coward. Wind Demon and the others looked at Devil's Knight, their expressions changing again and again. They originally thought that Nie Tian was already arrogant enough. They didn't expect this new Beacon's emperor to be even more arrogant than Nie Tian, directly challenging the strongest of the Gia sect, Yan Qing. Nie Tian frowned and naturally didn't fight. Since Devil's Knight took the initiative to fight the strongest Yan Qing, why should he stop him? No, not to mention, although Mo Ye's appearance had come as a surprise to Nie Tian, he had come at the perfect time. If it was an ordinary 9th-level Heavenly Tribulation martial artist challenging Yan Qing, Nie Tian definitely wouldn't have the slightest chance. But it was Devil's Knight. He felt that there was a chance, and the chance was not small. Then, Gia Sect's third elder stood up and looked at Nie Tian with a cold smile, his expression stern. Life Sect Beacon Emperor, then let me fight you. How about it? Nie Tian smiled faintly and gladly accepted the challenge. In this way, Fan Zhong's opponent became Gia Sect's fourth elder, who was the weakest person on the Gia Sect's side. I've long heard of Flag Master Fan's great name. Please come and teach me. At this moment, fourth elder's figure directly moved. Like a long rainbow, he stood coldly in the sky and called out to fight Fan Zhong. Lord Beacon Emperor, I'm going down. Fan Zhong's eyes slightly darkened. After saying this to Nie Tian, he then rose into the sky and stood opposite fourth elder. Baidu search 881 Chinese Network Yin. No advertising words. Chapter 44-29. Fan Zhong and the fourth elder of the Gia sect stood facing each other in the sky. Next in the valley, everyone's eyes were focused on the two, looking forward to the fight. Ghost the Cliff sect and the Fengtian sect had always been enemies. Now that they were facing off against each other because of the Wind Demon's clan, both sides would naturally go all out and fight to the death. The three battles were destined to be bloody. Flag Leader Fan, please. The fourth elder wore a white robe and flew in the air. He looked gentle and elegant, but his face was extremely gloomy and murderous. Fan Zhong frowned as if he had sensed something, but he quickly calmed down. Boom! Fan Zhong's aura was wild and surged in all directions. Next the crowd felt Fan Zhong's aura, but they were very calm and even a little disappointed. Very obviously, Fan Zhong's aura did not surprise them. Tianyue Flag Leader, one of the 4 flag leaders of the Fengtian sect, only has this much strength. How disappointing! The fourth elder looked at Fan Zhong from afar and laughed wildly. He did not take Fan Zhong seriously at all. How arrogant! Fan Zhong frowned and growled. He slammed his hand down. Suddenly, a surging power gathered in the void and turned into a mountain, pressing down on the fourth elder. Move of the heavenly mountain! The crowd below exclaimed in shock when they felt the oppressive aura surging towards them. Fan Zhong was called the Tianyue Flag Leader because of his Tianyue technique. The Tianyue technique was Fan Zhong's strongest attack. He used it right from the start, obviously trying to gain the upper hand and suppress the fourth elder. Swoosh! The fourth elder's eyes turned cold. Then, he waved his hand in the air, and a white streak of light pierced through the air. It tore through the illusionary mountains in the air and attacked Fan Zhong with an astonishing force. Oh no! Fan Zhong immediately sensed danger. His expression suddenly changed, and he cried out in alarm. His figure rapidly retreated, but he was still a step too late. He was directly struck, turning into a bloody trail as he fell straight down. Bam! Fan Zhong crashed into the ground, creating a deep pit with a radius of several dozen meters. Only then did he manage to stand up. You can't even withstand a single blow. The fourth elder's eyes darkened as he sneered disdainfully. Fan Zhong stabilized his body. There was a horrifying wound on his chest, and blood dyed half of his body red. His face was as pale as paper, without any color. Heaven arrived and activated his 10th life meridian. Immense life energy instantly healed the wounds on Fan Zhong's body. Thank you, Lord Beacon Emperor. Fan Zhong took a deep breath. His complexion turned slightly better, and he bowed to express his gratitude. Tian nodded and did not speak. To be honest, he was a little disappointed with Fan Zhong's performance. He had already vaguely predicted that Fan Zhong would most likely lose this battle. However, he did not expect Fan Zhong to lose so thoroughly. In any case, Zhong was a flagmaster, yet he couldn't even withstand a single attack from the Gia sect's fourth elder. The gap between them was a little too big. Everyone was surprised. They had not expected Fan Zhong to be defeated so quickly. This, just as Devil's Knight had said, Fan Zhong was just there to make up the numbers. No, the onlookers were even more shocked. Tian's methods were actually so miraculous. In the blink of an eye, Fan Zhong had mostly recovered. This kid's power is indeed strange. Fourth elder was even more shocked. Fan Zhong had been injured by his broken rainbow. Under normal circumstances, it would take at least a few months to recover. However, Tian had healed it in the blink of an eye. It was really strange. Lord Beacon Emperor, he's Mr. Fourth. Fan Zhong's expression returned to normal. He secretly transmitted his voice to Tian. He's Mr. Fourth. Tian's gaze trembled. He was quite surprised. It turned out that Mr. Fourth, who had been in contact with Fan Zhong, was the fourth elder of the Gia sect. Perhaps Wen Ho's disappearance was also related to this fourth elder. No wonder Fan Zhong had lost so badly. It seemed that fourth elder had long understood Fan Zhong's power. That was why he could defeat his opponent in one move. I hereby announce that Gia sect wins the first battle. At this moment, Wind Demon announced the results of the first battle. At the same time, it meant that the second battle was about to begin. Tian looked at Gia sect's third elder. Before he could say anything, the latter had already leaped into the sky. Tian, don't disappoint me. Tian shook his head and smiled bitterly. Just as he was about to go up, he heard Devil's Knight's voice. Tian twitched his lips. He did not say anything. Instead, he leaped into the sky. Everyone looked at the figures of Tian and third elder with a strange look. Although the battle between Fan Zhong and fourth elder had ended unexpectedly, the two were still considered martial artists of the same level. But at this moment, Tian and third elder were martial artists of two completely different levels. Tian's cultivation was only in the 9th heaven tribulation realm. He was a peak holy king. At this realm, even the genius martial artists could at most fight with some low-level heavenly perception holy emperors. But third elder's cultivation was in the 8th heaven martial realm. He was only one step away from a peak expert. In fact, most of the Sky Martial Saint ancestors stopped at LV8 of the Sky Martial Realm, because LV9 of the Sky Martial Realm was a bottleneck in the Sky Martial Realm. It was extremely difficult for ordinary cultivators to break through. Once a martial artist broke through the 9th level of the Heaven Realm, they could be called a true expert, but they were still a bit away from the true peak. Actually, even if they were in the same realm of the 9th level of the Heaven Realm, because of the difference in talent, the gap in battle power between warriors was very large. It wouldn't be too much to describe it as the difference between heaven and earth. For example, the Yang God Sword Emperor Hyakuten D. Kashu and the others were also in the 9th level of the Heaven Realm. However, they were clearly not on the same level as ordinary cultivators in the 9th level of the Heaven Realm. Yang Celestial Sword Emperor and the others could be called the extreme realm of sky martial arts, meaning the extreme of the sky martial saint ancestor. A 9th level heavenly tribulation holy king against an 8th level heaven martial realm holy ancestor. With such a difference in realm, was there really a chance? Almost everyone thought that Nye Tian would be killed by the third elder in one move. But Tang 13 and Devil's Knight, who truly understood Nye Tian, had burning gazes and looked forward to it. Lord Beacon Emperor, you and I are not warriors of the same level, but for the sake of the sect, I can only bully the weak. The third elder stood coldly in the sky, his long robe fluttering in the air. His aura was vigorous, and he had the demeanor of a grandmaster. In the eyes of others, the third elder's aura was already very strong, at least not something that Fan Zhong and the others could compare to. But for Nye Tian, the third elder could at most be considered barely passable. After all, Nye Tian had seen true experts before. With the third elder's strength, he probably couldn't even withstand the Yang God Sword Emperor's sword momentum. Dang. However, the current Nye Tian also couldn't withstand the Yang God's sword momentum. However, he was confident that if he reached the 8th level of the Heaven Realm, not only would he be able to withstand the Yang God's sword momentum, he could even fight the Yang God head-on. Make your move. Nye Tian's expression was indifferent. His eyes stared straight at the third elder, and at the corner of his eyes, a fiend god inverse mark appeared. At the same time, both of his eyes changed at the same time. Right. The eye demon's eye and the left eye, heaven's punishment god's rebellion, opened at the same time. Baidu Search 881 Chinese Network. No advertising words. Chapter 4430. Nye Tian had the god-devil body, and the god-devil body allowed his eyes to form the god-devil eyes. His right eye was the god-devil eye, and his left eye was the heavenly punishment god-rebel. Under normal circumstances, if Nye Tian's opponent was a martial artist of the same realm, he would crush his opponent in his normal state. And if the opponent's realm was much higher than his, he would activate his godfiend body in a critical situation. Only when the opponent was too strong would he use the demon eye to activate his godfiend body and stimulate the godfiend body's strength. However, activating both the demon eye and the heavenly punishment divine rebellion at the same time was extremely rare. In fact, it was the only time. Think back then, when Nye Tian fought against the human emperor and the young human emperor, he didn't use the celestial demon eyes at the same time. However, the current battle was obviously different from the battle against the human emperor and the young human emperor. Within the battle of the Renhuangs, the other party's cultivation was suppressed, and Nye Tian had the upper hand. But this was a battle against the third elder of the Gia sect. It was a battle of life and death. The Gia sect had always viewed the Beacon Heaven Fate sect as a great enemy. Now that the third elder had the chance to fight against the young Beacon Emperor, there was no reason for him not to give it his all. High up in the sky, Nye Tian's body was surging with incomparable godfiend energy. Godfiend inscriptions extended from the corner of his eyes and covered his entire body. Hiruntu at that time, he was like a devil, his aura suppressing the heavens and earth. When the crowd below sensed Nye Tian's aura, their expressions changed drastically. Is this guy really only at the 9th level of heavenly tribulation? Even some high-level Tianwu Saint Emperors might not be able to do that. So this is the power of the Beacon Emperor. It seems like Fengkuan's loss was not undeserved. Wind Ghost and the others discussed with shocked expressions. Such as if he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, it would have been very hard to believe that a 9th-level heavenly tribulation martial artist actually had such power. Beacon Emperor Nye Tian, so you were hiding your strength when you fought with Feng Kuan. The Wind Ghost's great elder Feng Yaoxing's pupils trembled, and a strange light surged in his eyes. He could sense that Nye Tian's aura was much stronger than when he fought against Feng Kuan. Obviously, the battle with Feng Kuan was not the limit of Nie Tian's strength. Difficult it was hard to believe that this young martial artist in front of him, who was only at the 9th level of heavenly tribulation, actually made Feng Yaoxing feel that he was unfathomable. In fact, Feng Yaoxing didn't even feel this way when he faced opponents who were stronger than him. Only Mo Yi looked at Nie Tian with a calm expression, the corner of his mouth twitching slightly as he said, "It's just that we can't win this battle." The strength Nie Tian revealed was indeed world-shocking, and it even overturned everyone's understanding of the martial Tao. But however, it was still too difficult for him to defeat the Ghost Cliff's third elder with such strength. "Very good, come on." High up in the sky, the third elder stood with his hands behind his back. He had the air of a grandmaster, but his eyes were fixed on Nie Tian. He did not dare to be careless. He originally thought that this battle would be very easy, but he did not expect that Nie Tian would be so terrifying that he felt a little pressure. Change of heaven and earth. Nie Tian's eyes darkened slightly. The sword in the sky streaked across the sky. As the divine demon power raged, the power of stars also burst out. The two powerful forces condensed in the void, and a boundless sword shadow appeared, causing the world to tremble. It blasted towards the third elder. The third elder frowned slightly. He took a step forward, and a huge seal vortex appeared under his feet. Then, a huge pillar of light burst out and enveloped his whole body. Boom! The next moment, a terrible roar sounded, and the void shook. The moment the huge sword shadow fell on the light pillar, it directly collapsed and turned into waves of sword will, rushing in all directions. Nie Tian's figure also retreated dozens of meters before he could stabilize himself. What a powerful protective seal! Nie Tian's eyes darkened, and his expression changed greatly. He did not expect the third elder to be able to open such a terrifying protective seal in an instant. According to the rumors, the third elder is not only a powerful martial artist, but also a powerful sealer. It seems that the rumors are true. Wind Demon looked at the scene in the sky with a gloomy expression and thought to himself. He did not expect that the third elder, who had an overwhelming advantage in strength, would choose to be on the defensive. The others also did not expect the third elder to be so conservative, as if he was afraid of Nie Tian. The third elder is indeed not an ordinary person. He can actually determine the true strength of Nie Tian just by looking at Nie Tian's aura. Feng Yaoxing expressed his approval of the third elder's strategy and secretly admired him. He asked himself if he was fighting against Nie Tian, he would also choose to be more careful and defend. Because Nie Tian was too strange, and he had repeatedly broken everyone's understanding. Against such a person, one must be extremely careful. Mr. Beacon Emperor, you are indeed strong. However, such strength is still not enough to break Ai's protective seal. The corner of the third elder's mouth curled up into a faint smile as he looked at Nie Tian. However, his eyes were extremely gloomy, revealing a provocative smile. It was as if he had seen through Nie Tian's scheme. Is that so? Nie Tianling laughed and moved again. Sword in the sky slashed down again, but when the sword shadow fell, it still could not break the third elder's protective seal. Kaboom! 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 In the sky there was a continuous rumbling sound. Waves of sword essence fell from the sky like a raging tsunami, causing the ground to tremble violently. In the blink of an eye, Nie Tian had slashed more than 10 times. Unfortunately, he was still unable to break through the third elder's protective seal. The protective seal looked like a faint pillar of light, but the power contained within it was unusually strong. It was like a great wall of steel, protecting the third elder within it. Everyone looked at Nie Tian's figure, and their expressions changed. They began to discuss. This kid's strength is indeed terrifying, but he is too young and has too little combat experience. He is still not comparable to the third elder of Gia sect. Yes, the third elder's protective seal cannot be broken at all. This Beacon Emperor is attacking like a madman, and he is only wasting his strength. The third elder has already won this battle without making a move. It seems that our Wind Demon's clan is going to cooperate with Gia sect," the Ghost Clan elders said, and some of them looked a little disappointed. Gia sect had already won the first round. If they won the second round, there would be no need to continue the third round, and the Wind Demon's clan would become a vassal force of Gia sect. However, after witnessing Nye Tian's strength, these elders suddenly felt that the Feng Tian Fate sect had the hope of reviving. Thus, they were somewhat disappointed. Wait, look. But at this time, the first elder, Feng Yaoxing, suddenly let out a strange cry. His eyes trembled as if he had seen something incredible. Everyone's expression changed at the same time. They looked over, and the scene in front of them instantly shocked them. They saw a crack appear on the protective seal around the third elder's body. Chapter 44:31. The third elder's protective seal formed a pillar of light outside his body. It was originally perfect, but at that moment, a glaring crack appeared on it. Without a doubt, this crack was left behind by Nye Tian's frenzied attacks. There were even people who said that Nye Tian's crazy attacks were just a waste of energy. But now, it seemed that this was not the case. After a long time, everyone reacted, and the shock in their eyes was replaced by pleasant surprise. They had originally thought that the outcome of this battle was already decided. But since Nye Tian showed signs of breaking through the third elder's protective seal, it meant that there was still hope for this battle. This kid's pupils are a little strange. High up in the sky, the third elder stood within the protective seal. There was no panic in his eyes, only confusion. In reality, the main reason why he chose to be on the defensive was because he wanted to see exactly how strong Nye Tian was. At the same time, he also noticed that Nye Tian's pupils were very strange. He seemed to be a martial artist with other pupils. But unlike other pupils, Nye Tian's eyes were different. Furthermore, the aura of his eye power was extremely small, as though he was condensing something. The third elder had a vague feeling that Nye Tian's eyes were hiding an extremely terrifying power, just waiting to deal him a fatal blow. However, the third elder did not expect that Nye Tian would be able to break his protective seal with brute force. With his current strength, even an ordinary 8th-level Heaven Martial Realm Sacred Ancestor would find it difficult to break through after activating the protective seal. In other words, Nye Tian's current strength was already no weaker than an 8th-level Heaven Martial Arts Sacred Ancestor. And his true cultivation was only at the 9th level of Heavenly Tribulation. At this moment, the third elder finally understood how terrifying the opponent he was facing was. "Third elder, can your protective seal still block one of my swords?" At this moment, Nye Tian's voice rang out from the void. The sword will around him was incomparably violent, like a giant serpent dancing wildly. The sharp and surging aura seemed to be able to tear the heavens and earth apart. Nye Tianling stood in the air, and there was a strong smell of blood in the air. Around him, blood energy burned like flames. His battle intent raged, burning the heavens and sweeping the earth. At this moment, not only had Nye Tian activated his Godfiend eyes and Godfiend body, but he was also burning his blood chi. However, he could not maintain this state for long. Furthermore, it was a heavy burden on his martial body. Even with his 10th vital meridian, it was still extremely strenuous for him. Boom! As soon as Nye Tian's voice fell, the sky sword drew a dazzling arc in the air. The void sank slightly and the space let out a low groan. Bang! In the next moment, when the sword shadow fell, the third elder's protective seal was finally unable to hold on any longer. With a loud sound, it shattered and turned into streams of light in the air. However, it was at this moment that third elder's hands formed a seal. His palms parted, and a beam of crimson light appeared in the air, moving with incredible speed to attack Nye Tian. Nye Tian instantly sensed danger, and his expression changed abruptly. He wanted to react, but it was already too late. Puff! In the void, wherever the scarlet light passed, a bloody line was drawn in the air. Nyetion's body trembled slightly. A fist-sized hole had appeared in his chest. Blood flowed continuously and dyed his body red. Lord Beacon Emperor! Fan Zhong and the others below exclaimed when they saw this. No matter how strong a martial artist was, once their heart was pierced, there was only one ending, death. Fengui Lingyun's eyes trembled. He was so overjoyed that he almost screamed. He could almost see the scene of Nyetion's soul perishing. Third Elder had indeed killed Nyetion. His plan to get someone else to do the dirty work had succeeded. However, at this moment, Nyetion's body stabilized in the air and stood steadily. Everyone's eyes trembled violently as they exclaimed in unison. How could Tion survive after his heart was pierced? High up in the sky, Third Elder was stunned for a moment, but he instantly understood. That fatal crimson light missed Nyetion's heart the moment it landed. To be more precise, it had pierced through half of Nyetion's heart. However, even so, such a serious injury would be fatal to an ordinary martial artist. At most, they would be able to take a few more breaths. However, Nyetion was able to stand again. This showed how tenacious his life force was. Fortunately, I have the 10th vital meridian. Nyetion gritted his teeth and held on, but his face was extremely pale. With half of his heart destroyed, even if he had the 10th vital meridian, his life would still be in danger. Nyetion, stop burning your blood qi. At this moment, Fat Cat's scream was heard. Its big face was pale with fright. At this moment, at this time, if Nyetion focused and used the 10th vital meridian to repair the damage to his heart, Nyetion should be able to recover very quickly. But if Nyetion continued to burn his blood qi, his life would really be in danger. Since we've already come this far, how can I admit defeat? Nyetion's eyes were deep and determined. His godly demonic eyes were still open and locked on to Third Elder. This guy is really crazy. Only then did everyone notice that Nyetion was still burning his blood qi. Their gazes all changed. Under such circumstances, he still wanted to burn his blood qi to continue fighting. Nyetion's fighting spirit was so fierce that it made people's hair stand on end. Nyetion, in this state you are at your strongest. Only Devil's Knight laughed coldly. His eyes glowed faintly as if he was waiting for something. In this world, other than Nyetion himself, the person who understood Nyetion the most was probably Devil's Knight. Devil's Knight was born from Nyetion's body. The two of them had the same bloodline, but they were not father and son. Devil's Knight had experienced all of Nyetion's battles. He knew that Nyetion was at his strongest when he was in an extreme state of life and death. And moreover, Nyetion's godly demonic eyes had not been used yet. Lord Beacon Emperor, are you still not going to admit defeat? Third Elder faced the heavily injured Nyetion, but he was not in a hurry to attack. He was very cautious. Even at this moment, he did not dare to be careless. If Nyetion was willing to admit defeat, he could give up on killing Nyetion. Because as long as Nyetion admitted defeat, the Wind Demon's clan would become the vassal of the Gia sect. How could he let the heavily injured Nyetion leave alive? And the Third Elder did not attack mainly because he was afraid of Nyetion. He had sensed the power of Nyetion's eyes from the beginning. Therefore, he had a grudge against him for not using his eyes. If it was any other martial artist, he would have attacked long ago. But the Third Elder was a sealer. He could sense the horror of that pair of eyes. Nyetion, however, gave a cold laugh and said in a disdainful and provocative tone, "You alone aren't enough." The Third Elder frowned. Even under such provocation, he was still very calm. "Third Elder, what are you waiting for? Why don't you kill him?" But at this time, Yan Qing could not wait any longer. In his opinion, Nyetion was already a corpse. He really did not understand why the Third Elder was still hesitating. "Since you are not attacking, then let me do it." At this moment Nye Tian actually spoke. He sneered and his aura soared again. The sword intent was wild and swept across the world. Chapter 44-32. Boom! High up in the sky, Nye Tian's entire body erupted with sword intent. His entire person was like a fierce beast, wild and fierce, looking down on everything. Lunatic, this guy is really a lunatic. Everyone's eyes trembled. They were completely shocked by Nye Tian's actions. In such a serious injury, not only did Nye Tian not admit defeat, but he also took the initiative to attack again. If this wasn't a lunatic, what was? In the void, Nye Tian slashed down with his sword. Endless sword intent surged endlessly like raging waves. A terrifying and deep sonorous sword cry resounded between heaven and earth, like the whine of a giant beast. The sword cry was like thunder from the 9 heavens, piercing through the clouds and splitting stones. Boom! Under the gaze of many pairs of eyes, the sword light around Nye Tian shone like the sun of a sword, blasting the world. Everyone, their expressions were dazed, and the shock in their hearts could no longer be expressed in words. It was hard to believe that such a surging sword actually came from a heavily injured 9th level heaven tribulation warrior. Stinking brat, since you are seeking death, this old man will fulfill your wish. Third Elder's eyes darkened when he felt the powerful sword momentum rushing towards him. He roared, and his entire body bloomed with light. It was as if holy light was shining all over. He was a sacred ancestor in the 8th level of the sky martial realm and naturally had his own dignity. Being suppressed by a sacred king like this, if he still wasn't angry, he would really be a coward. Die! The third elder roared and struck out with his palm. Heaven and earth shook violently, and the sky seemed like it was about to collapse. The power of one palm suppressed everything. High in the sky, a sword shadow and a palm print, like 2 giant beasts, resounded between heaven and earth. Boom! In the next moment, the 2 forces collided head-on. The world shook, and the destructive power completely erupted, turning into rolling waves that rushed in all directions. For a moment, the world lost its color, and the sun and moon lost their light. Boom! 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 In the sky, endless wild forces surged, as if thousands of beasts were collapsing, as if they were going to annihilate the world. Everyone's expressions froze. This was the first time that Nye Tian and the third elder had truly faced off against each other. They hadn't expected it to be so fierce. At this moment, not only were the forces in the sky crazily colliding and annihilating. Even the ground was covered in deep fissures like scars on the ground. Madman at the center of the wave, Nye Tian's body swayed incessantly. He allowed the wild forces to strike his body that was already dripping with blood, but he didn't care in the slightest. His eyes pierced through the waves and locked onto the third elder. Even though the third elder was very powerful, he could not stop himself from being pushed back by this level of impact. This is the moment. Nye Tian's eyes gleamed as he finally grasped the opportunity. His lips curled into a cold smile as a pair of astral soul wings appeared on his back. With a flap of his wings, he forcefully withstood the impact of the raging waves as he dashed towards the third elder. The elder was frantically retreating, trying to escape the impact of the raging waves. But right at this moment, he suddenly felt a strange chill assaulting him, and his expression changed. His intuition told him that this was the aura of death approaching. In the blink of an eye, the third elder stomped his feet in an attempt to activate a protective seal, but it was too late. The sound of flesh being torn apart was heard. The third elder instinctively lowered his head and saw his head flying away from his body. And on his neck, where his head should have been, there was actually a pillar of blood. He tried his best to move his hands, as if trying to pull down the flying head. However, he had no strength left and could not lift his hands. Everything was too late. 3. The third elder did not even see clearly where the force came from before he was decapitated. The flying head's eyes were filled with despair and soon, it lost all signs of life. After a long while, the turbid waves in the sky dissipated. A silver-haired figure covered in blood appeared before everyone's eyes. It was Nyetian. But in Nyetian's palm was a bloody head. The third elder. This. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air at the same time. They were all petrified. The third elder of the Gia sect had been killed. Nyetian had won. This is impossible. After a long time, Vice Sect leader Ghost Cliff Yenqing roared like a frightened pheasant, all the hair on his body standing on end. The third elder had been defeated and killed. This was a fact that he could not accept. How could the young Beacon Emperor, who was already heavily injured, kill the third elder? But after a long period of shock, the others finally reacted. Countless pairs of eyes looked at Nyetian with unconcealable fear. Oni cultivator in the 9th level of the Tribulation Realm, who had killed a cultivator in the 8th level of the Sky Realm, was enough to make anyone fearful. Nyetian slowly descended. He raised his hand and returned the third elder's head to Yenqing. This was a provocation, a blatant provocation. Yenqing's eyes were bloodshot. He gritted his teeth as if he wanted to skin Nyetian alive. Nyetian was calm and even had a smile on his face. I announce that the Phontian sect wins the second battle. After a long while, the Wind Demon announced the end of the second battle and the start of the third. After the Wind Demon finished speaking, he looked at Nyetian with a complicated expression. No one knew what he was thinking. Beacon Emperor, are you okay? Fan Zhong and the others came to Nyetian's side and asked anxiously. Nyetian took a deep breath and shook his head to indicate that he was fine. His complexion looked much better. Even the half of his heart was slowly healing. Fan Zhong and the others knew that this was the 10th meridian in Nyetian's body. They were all shocked. Nyetian recovered a bit and looked at the sky. He looked at Devil's Night from afar and thought, Devil's Night, I didn't disappoint you. I hope you won't disappoint me too. Nyetian wasn't very clear about Devil's Night's true strength. However, he knew that Devil's Night had a power that even he was afraid of, defy the stars. Dang. At first, Nyetian thought that Devil's Night was born from the demon origin embryo. Even Devil's Night thought so. It wasn't until Hyakuten appeared that Qing Qi told Nyetian the truth. Devil's Night was the same as Hyakuten. They were both born from the Star Origin Stone. The Star Origin Stone was where the power of the 10,000 stars gathered. However, Hyakuten and Devil's Night were born from it. They were dark and sinister existences. Before, Nyetian didn't feel the aura of the stars from Devil's Night. He thought that Devil's Night didn't inherit the power of the stars. But the truth was that the power of the stars had undergone some kind of mutation in Moye's body, and it had become the power of defying the stars. The answer to how strong defy the stars was could be found in Hyakuten. And according to Qing Qi, Devil's Night's potential was very likely to far surpass Hyakuten's. In the future, he would become an existence even more terrifying than Hyakuten. Therefore, Nyetian was looking forward to seeing how strong Devil's Night was. Chapter 44-33. In the sky, Devil's Night and Yenqing faced each other. One had an evil aura while the other had a mountainous aura. As the vice sect master of the Gia sect, Yenqing was obviously stronger than the third elder. However, Moye, who was at the same cultivation base as Nyetian, didn't show the slightest fear in the face of such a powerful expert. Instead, a playful smile could be seen on his face, as if his opponent was nothing but a toy in his eyes. The crowd below could feel Devil's Night's arrogance, and couldn't help but discuss. This guy looks very similar to the Beacon Emperor of the Fate sect. I wonder if they are brothers? Although they look similar, this Beacon's Emperor has a colder aura and is also more arrogant. I think that the two Beacon Emperors are brothers and they are twins. Unfortunately, one is from the Fate sect while the other is from the Soul sect. It's quite interesting. The crowd's eyes lit up as they said this. They were obviously looking forward to Devil's Knight's performance. Demon, ever since Knight appeared, his arrogance was even greater than Yetion's. Moreover, he also had the title of the Beacon Emperor. Therefore, the crowd naturally guessed that he was no weaker than Yetion. The Beacon King's people, I have heard some rumors about them in the past. Fan Zhong leaned close to Yetion and whispered, "It is said that only those with 9 soul lines can become the Beacon Emperor of the Sky Beacon Soul Sect. Since this person is the Beacon's Emperor, he most likely has 9 soul lines." Soul line? Yetion frowned in confusion. Yes. Fan Zhong nodded and explained, soul lines are similar to lifelines. However, one represents the Heavenly Tao Soul Matrix, while the other represents the Martial Tao Fate Matrix. Our Sky Beacon Fate Sect cultivates the Martial Tao Fate Matrix, while the Sky Beacon Soul Sect cultivates the Heavenly Tao Fate Matrix. However, compared to people who cultivated their birth providences, there were even fewer people who cultivated their soul providences. Therefore, when the Fengtian sect split, the stronger Fengtian Fate sect inherited the original sect while the Fengtian Soul sect was forced to leave. So that's how it is. Yetion nodded slightly and understood a lot. He guessed that the reason why the Sky Beacon Soul sect chose the Beacon Emperor was similar to the Sky Beacon Fate sect. Institute therefore, the Heaven Beacon art that Yetion cultivated was not the complete one. It was only the Heaven Beacon Life art. And the entire Heaven Beacon art should contain the Heaven Beacon Fate sect and the Heaven Beacon Soul art. If that's the case, doesn't that mean the first Beacon Emperor I saw had 9 life veins and 9 soul veins at the same time? Yetion suddenly thought of something and was shocked. It was no wonder that even though the first Beacon Emperor had died, his spirit could not be destroyed, and he could still maintain such great power. Brat, you really are the most arrogant person I've ever seen. Yanqing stared coldly at Devil's Knight and felt the disdain in the latter's eyes. He suppressed the anger in his heart and said solemnly. After the third elder's crushing defeat, Yanqing was clearly much more cautious. He didn't want the third elder's tragedy to repeat itself. Is that so? Devil's Knight smiled coldly and said mockingly, I hope that sect leader Yen isn't the stupidest person I've ever seen. What do you mean? Yanqing's face was so dark that it was almost dripping water. He asked cold. Because this is the first time I've seen a 9th-level Sky Martial Realm Sacred Ancestor be afraid of a 9th-level Heavenly Tribulation Sacred King. Devil's Knight laughed and raised his eyebrows. Tell me, aren't you the stupidest person? You! Yanqing growled. He didn't know how to refute. Indeed, he was a little afraid of Devil's Knight. He could sense that Devil's Knight's aura was even stranger than Yetion's, and Devil's Knight's composure made him even more uncertain. He had already seen a 9th-level Heavenly Tribulation Sacred King kill a 8th-level Sky Martial Realm Sacred Ancestor. So it was not impossible that he, a 9th-level Sky Martial Realm Sacred Ancestor, would die at the hands of a 9th-level Heavenly Tribulation Sacred King, Devil's Knight. When everyone saw this scene, their expressions became strange and complicated. At this moment, anyone could see that Yanqing was really a little afraid. But who would dare to laugh at Yanqing? If Devil's Knight was fighting any one of them, would they be afraid? Sect leader Yen, are you still not going to make a move? Devil's Knight saw that Yanqing was flustered and exasperated, and provoked him even more disdainfully. You're courting death. Yanqing could no longer restrain himself. He roared, and suddenly, a shocking power surged up like a torrential red stream, as if to swallow the sun, the moon, and the world. Boom! High up in the sky, an explosion sounded. Everyone below felt an extremely powerful pressure, as if even the ground had sunk a few inches under the pressure of this power. Is this the power of a peak expert? Everyone's eyes trembled, and their expressions were filled with shock. The power that Yanqing had erupted with was far from what the third elder and the fourth elder could compare with. Heavens, the 9th level of the martial realm, and the 8th level of the sky martial realm, were indeed different. Wingui Lingyun's eyes trembled slightly, and he was extremely shocked in his heart. Not long ago, he had just broken through to the 9th level of the sky martial realm. He originally thought that he could be ranked in the 7th sacred world of cultivators, but now that he saw Yanqing, he knew how big the gap was. Yanqing was the vice-sect leader of the Gia sect. Obviously, he was not the strongest expert of the Ghost Cliff, but his strength was definitely above that of the Wind Demon. Nie Tian looked at Yanqing, but the corners of his mouth twitched slightly. He was not the least bit surprised. Yanqing's strength was indeed not bad, but he was still far away from the true peak. Not to mention comparing Yanqing to the Yang God Sword Emperor and the others, even the deans of the 5 academies were far inferior. Brat, I'd like to see how strong you are to dare to be so arrogant. Yanqing roared in the sky, and his aura suddenly rose several times. Then, he slapped his palm and a surging current appeared. It was as if the Milky Way was falling from the sky, and it pressed down on Devil's Night. Nie Tian Guang couldn't help but tremble. Just from the power of this palm, he could see that Yanqing was more terrifying than the Third Elder. If the person he was fighting just now was not the Third Elder, but Yanqing, the consequences would have been even more serious. Facing this attack that could destroy the heavens and the earth, Devil's Knight's figure moved, and he actually directly rushed over. Bang! In the next instant, a muffled sound came from the sky. Under everyone's gaze, Devil's Knight unexpectedly exploded in the sky, and he turned into a bloody light. In some people's eyes trembled, and they couldn't believe this bloody scene. Such it was normal for an ordinary 9th heaven tribulation king to be killed by Yanqing's palm, but Devil's Knight was the beacon's emperor, an existence comparable to Nie Tian. Nie Tian Guang also frowned a little puzzled. With such strength, how dare you be so arrogant in front of me? You're asking for death. Yanqing was stunned at first, and then he confirmed it, and then he laughed coldly. Is that so? But before he finished speaking, a cold laugh came from behind him. Huh! Yanqing was suddenly stunned, and his expression suddenly changed. He immediately turned around, and the scene in front of him made him unable to help but be stunned. High up in the sky, there were tens of thousands of figures standing coldly, like divine soldiers descending from the sky. But looking closely, these people's faces were all the same. They were all Devil's Knight. Chapter 44-34. High up in the sky, the silhouettes of Devil's Knight filled the sky. There were tens of thousands of them, sending chills down everyone's spine. That was one of his clones. At this moment, everyone realized that the one that was killed by Yanqing was merely one of Devil's Knight's clones. However, everyone's expressions did not ease. Instead, they were even more shocked. Nobody there noticed that Devil's Knight had used clones. Even the powerful wind ghost Ling Yun and Tang 13, who had the ghost eye, didn't notice anything. Devil's Knight's capabilities were truly eerie. How is this possible? Yanqing finally realized and growled. Since the moment Devil's Knight appeared, he had been watching. When did Devil's Knight use his clones? Following which, Yanqing sensed the demonic knight before him, and to his surprise, every single one of them had the exact same aura. It was hard to believe that Devil's Knight could summon so many clones, and every single one of them was exactly the same as his original self. Headmaster Yen, are you satisfied with this kind of battle? Devil's Knight finally spoke. They spoke at the same time. Instantly, their voices were like the voice of the devil that penetrated Yanqing's ears, making him even more annoyed. I will kill all of your clones. Let's see how you hide. Yanqing was completely enraged. His chi roared as both of his palms reached out. Instantly, an endless amount of energy surged out. Like thousands of dancing snakes, they covered the sky and pressed towards Devil's Knight's 10,000 clones. His chi covered the sky and the earth. Like a flood or a beast, it was as if it wanted to destroy everything. Devil's Knight's clones moved at the same time. They all retreated in a frenzy, as if they were trying to hide. Instantly, the sky above was a blur. Waves after waves of energy continued to chase after Devil's Knight's clones. However, the clones were extremely agile and were able to evade the attack. Everyone was stunned by this scene and only reacted after a long while. This beacon's emperor's spiritual strength is really strong. To think that he can control so many doppelgangers so exquisitely. These clones aren't that strong, but it won't be easy to kill them all. As long as I don't kill all the doppelgangers, my true body won't be exposed. Looks like this battle will be interesting. No one would have thought that this battle would turn out like this. Fat, don't you feel that there's something wrong with the auras of Devil's Knight's doppelgangers? Nye Tian frowned as he looked at the scene in the sky. He seemed to have noticed something unusual. No, this isn't just a doppelganger, it's some kind of soul lattice rune. The fat cat was silent for a moment. Then, she suddenly realized something and cried out in surprise. Soul grid runes? Nye Tian was taken aback. He immediately recalled that the stone statues he had seen in the Heaven's Fire Beacon sect also had many soul patterns carved on them. No wonder he felt that the aura of Devil's Knight's doppelganger was inexplicably familiar. Yes. The fat cat nodded heavily. There was a hint of shock on her face as she said, and these aren't just simple soul grid runes. They're runes formed by the spirit of the soul line. What do you mean? Nye Tian furrowed his brows. He was confused. Nye Tian, do you still remember the runes on the Heaven Beacon's stone statues? The fat cat didn't answer his question directly. Of course. Nye Tian didn't hesitate. He only noticed Devil's Knight's abnormality when he thought of the runes on the stone statues. These doppelgangers of Devil's Knight are the same as the runes on the Heaven Beacon's stone statues. They're all formed by the spirit of the soul line. The fat cat was shocked and confused at the same time. She murmured, with his soul lattice cultivation, it's impossible for him to form so many soul line spirits. There are so many soul line spirits. You're saying that the spirit of the soul line is similar to the blood of the lifeline, and these runes are a kind of power that comes from Devil's Knight's soul lattice, right? Nye Tian's brows furrowed even tighter. He only understood half of what the fat cat said. You can say that. The fat cat nodded and said, from my observation, these soul lattice doppelgangers are equivalent to dozens of stone statues in the Heaven Beacon sect. Dozens of stone statues? Nye Tian's expression changed, and he almost exclaimed in surprise. He remembered that the fat cat once said that each of the Heaven Beacon's stone statues was no weaker than a sky martial divine ancestor. Devil's Knight was able to form dozens of doppelgangers in the blink of an eye. This was too terrifying. In the past, Qing Qi had said that the reason why Hayakuten was so powerful was because of the Against the Stars power. However, Devil's Knight did not have the aura of the Stars power. This meant that the Stars' power had undergone a drastic change in his body. In other words, Devil's Knight's body had given birth to Against the Stars' power that was far stronger than Hayakuten's. Nye Tian's dark side was originally stronger than Dong Huang Jingrong's. From the moment Devil's Knight was born, he was more talented than Hayakuten. In addition, the Fiend God nascent embryo could fuse with the Star Origin Stone, which proved that the power of the Fiend God was not weaker than the power of the stars. Therefore, Mo's star-defying power was absolutely terrifying beyond imagination. Perhaps this was why Devil's Knight had such a strong soul lattice. In fact, Nye Tian had already prepared himself for Devil's Knight's power. However, he didn't expect Devil's Knight to be this strong. Nye Tian, look. At this time, Fat Cat seemed to have discovered something and exclaimed. Nye Tian's eyes widened when he saw Devil's Knight's soul lattices standing in the sky. Each of them occupied a part of the sky and their auras were linked together. This is... In the next moment, Nye Tian finally understood. His expression suddenly changed, and he gulped. Only then did he say two words, a formation. That's right, Mo's tens of thousands of soul lattice doppelgangers didn't appear in the void in a chaotic manner. Instead, they were arranged in an orderly manner, strictly following some kind of rule. At the same time, their auras were slowly released, linking together to form a formation. This formation seems to be similar to the stone statue formation of Feng Tianming sect. Next, Nye Tian made an even more terrifying discovery. His heart pounded so hard that it felt like it was going to jump out. Although he didn't know much about the stone statue formation of Feng Tianming sect, he could still understand the basic structure of the formation. At this moment, the arrangement of these soul lattices was very similar to the Feng Tianming stone statues. Yes. Fat Cat also noticed this and nodded heavily. It seems like this fella has some understanding of the stone statue formation. The stone statue formation of Feng Tianming sect was the former Feng Tian sect. The Feng Tianming sect was separated from the Feng Tian sect. Since Devil's Knight became the beacon emperor of Feng Tianming sect, it was reasonable for him to have some understanding of the stone statue formation. Moreover, the Soul sect cultivated the heavenly Tao soul lattice, so they naturally had a better understanding of formation seals. What's going on? In the sky, Yan Qing wanted to forcefully kill Devil's Knight's soul lattices. However, not only did he fail, he also felt a strange pressure coming from the surrounding space. Moreover, the pressure was getting stronger and stronger. His expression changed, and he had a bad feeling about this. Please remember this book's domain name. 4M. Chapter 4435. Everyone looked at the scene in the sky. Some people also felt that something was wrong, and their expressions began to change. Is sect leader Yen hiding his strength? Why do I feel that his aura is getting weaker and weaker? Why is he still hiding his strength at this time? He is clearly being suppressed. A heavenly tribulation king sage is suppressing a divine ancestor in the 9th tier of the sky martial arts realm. Is this possible? More and more people saw the clues, and their eyes were filled with shock and confusion. Devil's Knight's soul clones did not look strong. Why was Yan Qing not able to kill them, but instead being suppressed? Finally, someone saw the clues and exclaimed, "Don't you think that these clones look like a formation when they are linked together?" Everyone's eyes trembled violently as they looked at the sky and understood. At this time, everyone could feel that the aura of Devil's Knight's clones was getting stronger and stronger. The vigorous aura was like an invisible hand that was holding Yan Qing down. So it's a formation. It seems that I have underestimated you. Yan Qing finally understood. His eyes were trembling, not out of fear, but out of anger and fighting spirit. Although he had been furious just now, he had not lost his reason, so he had held back. However, this gave Devil's Knight an opportunity to trap him in the formation. "Kid, let me see how strong this formation of yours is." Then, Yan Qing laughed wildly. Suddenly, power surged around him, and waves of air rolled. The aura of his bloodlines spread and actually condensed outside Yan Qing's body into a giant green python. Then, Yan Qing laughed wildly. Yan Qing's bloodline power. Seeing this, everyone's eyes trembled violently, and they exclaimed. It seemed that Yan Qing was really angry at this time. "Kid, is my true martial dragon strong enough to break your formation?" Yan Qing laughed wildly. His face was distorted, and his whole body was trembling. He was like a fierce beast that was about to break out of its cage. Up in the void, Moyi didn't say anything. Instead, his avatars continued to gather and condense into a grand formation. It was as if he wanted to use the power of the grand formation to suppress Yan Qing to death. Everyone's nerves were taut, and they didn't even dare to blink for fear of missing out on a wonderful moment. Apart from Nye Tian and a few other young martial artists, everyone else present was a sacred ancestor at the advanced heaven martial state. In their opinion, it was basically impossible for Devil's Knight to defeat Yan Qing with a formation. After all, Yen Qing was a sacred ancestor at the 9th level of the Sky Martial Realm. Even in the entire 7th cultivator of true cultivators, he was a powerful expert. If he was really crushed to death by a large array, that would be too aggrieving. Roar. At that moment, Yen Qing's silhouette moved. He stomped on the ground, like a dragon soaring into the sky. The true martial dragon let out a violent roar, like an azure dragon. In an instant, wherever the true martial dragon's body passed through, a torrent surged out in a frenzy, surging and surging. Boom, boom, boom. Amidst intense rumbling sounds, the grand formation formed by the soul clone actually showed signs of being on the verge of collapse. Ha ha! Trying to trap me with such a small formation? What a joke! Yen Qing laughed maniacally when he saw this. The true martial dragon's aura grew stronger, causing the grand formation to rumble endlessly. It seemed like it was on the verge of collapsing. Looks like the beacon's emperor is going to lose. Everyone's eyes were burning with excitement. They seemed a little nervous. Nie Tian furrowed his brows. He was a little confused. He could sense that the power contained in the soul clone was far greater than this. It shouldn't be able to break through it. Could it be that Devil's Knight is planning something else? A puny snake dares to break through my grand formation? At that moment, Devil's Knight finally spoke. His deep voice echoed in the grand formation. It sounded like the cry of a ghost, and it was filled with a frightening eeriness. Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, all the soul clone moved at the same time. In an instant, the entire grand formation was activated, and it rumbled endlessly, causing the heavens and earth to tremble. Everyone's expression changed at the same time. They could sense that the pressure coming from the sky had increased by several times. Yen Qing's figure was engulfed by the grand formation. Even the giant true martial dragon disappeared from the grand formation. What is going on? The crowd was in disbelief at the scene before them. What did Devil's Knight do to suppress Yen Qing again? From the looks of it, Yen Qing was completely suppressed this time, and there was no way he could fight back. High up in the sky, the grand formation rumbled as the soul clone rotated at high speed. Gradually, the soul clone changed shape and turned into strange runic inscriptions. The runic inscriptions connected together, and from afar, it looked like a giant ball of darkness. In the beginning, one could still see the violent shock waves from the ball of darkness, but after a while, the shock waves disappeared. It seemed like Yen Qing was still resisting, but he had completely lost the ability to do so. After a while, the ball of darkness that was formed by the soul clone's runic inscriptions began to shrink. It was like a spherical whirlpool was collapsing. Everyone couldn't help but gasp when they saw this scene. At this moment, Yen Qing was in the ball of darkness. If the ball of darkness continued to shrink, wouldn't Yen Qing be squeezed to death? Such a simple, primitive, yet brutal method was far beyond the expectations of everyone present. While everyone was still in shock, a figure appeared from the void like a sharp sword, standing coldly above the ball of darkness. Look, it's the beacon's emperor. Everyone's eyes trembled, and someone exclaimed in surprise. The person who appeared was none other than Devil's Knight. It turned out that Devil's Knight's real body did not appear among the soul clones. Instead, he had used a clever method to hide himself. Perhaps, even if Yen Qing killed all the soul clones, he might not be able to find Devil's Knight. Eyebrows furrowed, Nie Tian looked at Mo Yi and muttered to himself, perhaps this guy was a soul-powered doppelganger from the very beginning. At the start of the battle, Yen Qing killed one of Devil's Knight's clones with a single palm strike. However, no one knew when Devil's Knight's real body disappeared. Now, it seemed that the biggest possibility was that when Devil's Knight first appeared, it was not his real body, but a soul clone. Nie Tian's gaze locked onto Devil's Knight from afar. He saw a cold and sinister smile on the latter's face, as if he was waiting for something. At this moment, the people from Gia's sect had already lost all hope. They could only watch from afar and pray for a miracle to happen. After a while, the ball of runic inscriptions had shrunk from a few thousand meters to a few meters. "It's about time." Devil's Knight looked at the ball of runic inscriptions and murmured. His face was full of joy, as if he was about to complete a wonderful work of art. He could not help but feel excited. Soul runic inscriptions, stone statue array. At this moment, Fat Cat's excited voice suddenly rang in Yetion's mind. "I understand now. Please remember this book's domain name. 4M. Chapter 4436. Fat, what do you understand?" Yetion, who was originally concentrating on observing Devil's Knight, was startled by Fat Cat's words. He immediately calmed down and asked, "I understand what this fellow wants to do." Fat Cat was very agitated. Her eyes were trembling as if she was afraid. "Do what?" Yetion frowned, not knowing why Fat Cat was so agitated. Fat Cat did not answer directly. Instead, she took a deep breath and said, "Devil's Knight could have easily killed Yanqing with the Soul Lattice doppelganger, but he didn't do so. Instead, he used the doppelganger to activate a large formation. Then, he used the formation to carve the Soul Lattice runes into Yanqing's divine soul." "What do you mean?" Yetion could not help but be stunned. But he already felt that something was wrong. Even his voice changed slightly. Carving the Soul Lattice runes into a person's divine soul, this was the first time Yetion heard of such a thing. Using the Soul Lattice runes to control Yanqing. Fat Cat's face darkened as she said heavily. Yetion's eyes flickered nonstop. Although he did not fully understand, he more or less understood Fat Cat's meaning. It seemed that Devil's Knight wanted to carve his Soul Lattice runes into Yanqing's divine soul, replacing Yanqing's divine soul and completely controlling the latter. If that was the case, then once Devil's Knight succeeded, wouldn't Yanqing become a marionette, a puppet? At this time, the rune ball had already shrunk to the size of a person. Moreover, it was slowly carving the outline of a person. Everyone looked at the strange scene in front of them, and their expressions became sluggish. They did not dare to believe their eyes. They were all powerhouses and had seen countless strange things in their lives. But what they saw in front of them was definitely the strangest thing they had ever experienced in their lives. Slowly, the rune ball completely shrunk, as if it had disappeared. A figure appeared in front of everyone. Yanqing. But at this moment, Yanqing's expression was lifeless, and his eyes were empty. He was like a walking corpse, without the slightest elegance to speak of. "What's wrong with him?" Everyone looked at Yanqing, wondering what had happened to him. Yetion's eyes trembled as he sensed Yanqing's aura. Yanqing's body no longer had the same aura as before. His entire body was occupied by Devil's Knight's Soul Lattice runes. "From now on, your name will be..." Devil's Knight thought for a moment, then said, "Puppet One." "Yes, Master." Yanqing nodded and bowed in response. "This..." Hearing how Yanqing addressed Devil's Knight, everyone's faces changed, and they didn't know what to say. How did the vice-sect leader of Gia sect turn into a servant who respects Devil's Knight so much in a blink of an eye? What was going on? Devil's Knight's figure moved and appeared in front of everyone. Puppet One immediately followed him like a walking corpse. "He's already my puppet. The result of this battle should be obvious." Devil's Knight looked at Wind Demon and smiled evilly. "Puppet?" Wind Demon's pupils shrank, and his tongue didn't listen to him. How did the vice-sect leader of Gia sect, an expert at the peak of the 7th cultivator sacred world, become a puppet of Devil's Knight? What exactly did Devil's Knight do to Yanqing? At this time, Gia sect's 4th elder roared and pointed at Devil's Knight with killing intent. "Smelly brat, what did you do to sect leader Yen?" Devil's Knight frowned, and Puppet One behind him suddenly moved. It took a step forward and directly sent a palm out. Bang! With a muffled sound, 4th elder was directly sent flying. After landing on the ground, he spat out a mouthful of blood. He was originally not Yan Qing's opponent, so he was caught off guard and directly hit hard. Everyone was dumbfounded and looked at Devil's Knight in horror and fear, not even daring to breathe loudly. Yan Qing, who was originally the strongest person on the scene, inexplicably became Puppet One. This was a heavy blow to everyone. Until now, no one had figured out how Devil's Knight turned Yan Qing into Puppet One. Devil's Knight didn't explain anything and just looked at Wind Demon and asked, "Wind Demon clan leader, can you announce the result?" "Of course." Wind Demon reacted and immediately announced, "The Fengtian sect wins the third battle." The Fengtian sect won 2 out of 3 battles and smoothly won the entire battle. This also meant that the Wind Demon clan and the Fengtian sect would form an alliance. "Let's go." Fourth Elder looked at Nye Tian and the others angrily and shouted in a low voice. He led the people of Gia sect and prepared to leave. Wait. However, at this moment, Mo Yi coldly smiled. His eyes emitted a cold light as he slowly swept his gaze across the Fourth Elder and the others. He indifferently said, "The old ones can stay, the young ones can leave." The old ones were naturally the few elders of Gia sect, and the young ones were the few young disciples. The young disciples didn't matter, but the few elders were not weak. It would be troublesome to keep them alive, so it was better to just kill them. What do you want to do?" Fourth Elder felt the coldness in Devil's Knight's eyes and could not help but change his expression, revealing an unconcealable fear. "What do you think?" The corner of Mo Ye's mouth twitched coldly. The puppet behind him directly struck out with its palm. Before the other elder could even react, he was directly smashed into a pile of minced meat. Immediately after, Puppet One was about to attack Fourth Elder again, but it was stopped by Nye Tian. "Wait a minute." Nye Tian looked at Devil's Knight and said hurriedly, "Keep him alive, he still has use." Devil's Knight smiled at Nye Tian and then Puppet One retreated. Puppet One was his soul matrix puppet. His divine soul had already been replaced by his soul matrix runes, so he did not need to order it at all. As long as he willed it, he could freely control it, just like a clone of his divine soul. "Fan Zhong!" Nye Tian shouted. Fan Zhong immediately understood and took a step forward. His large hand descended and held Fourth Elder tightly. The heavily injured Fourth Elder could no longer resist. Instantly, he felt a terrifying force invading his body, causing him to feel the pain of being burned. "Mr. Fourth, this is the divine burning life fire unique to our Fengtian sect. If you want to live, perform well." Fan Zhong smiled cold and brought Fourth Elder in front of Nye Tian. Knowing that his identity had been exposed, Fourth Elder was like an eggplant that had been hit by frost. "Wen Ho was kidnapped by the Gia sect, right?" Nye Tian frowned and asked cold. "Yes." Fourth Elder hesitated for a moment but finally nodded. The corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched. He then looked at the few disciples from the Gia sect and said, "Go back and tell your sect leader that the Beacon Emperor of the Fengtian sect is willing to exchange your Fourth Elder for Wen Ho." "Yes, yes, yes." The disciples reacted and nodded. They did not dare to stay any longer and turned to leave. Devil's Knight looked at Nye Tian and did not say anything. Please remember this book's domain name. 4M. Chapter 4437. Wind Demon Clan, Conference Hall. Nye Tian asked the people from Gia sect to bring a message to the Gia sect master that he was willing to exchange the Fourth Elder for Wen Ho. Then, he let the disciples from Gia sect leave. After that, Nye Tian handed the Fourth Elder over to Fan Zhong and Wen Lun. Then, he followed the Wind Demon and the others to the Wind Demon clan's conference hall with Devil's Knight. In the conference hall, Wind Demon sat in the main seat. Below him were the elders and other higher-ups of the Wind Demon clan. Other than the people from the Wind Demon clan, there were only 2 outsiders, Nye Tian and Devil's Knight. Next, they were going to talk about the alliance between the Wind Demon clan and the Fengtian sect. Originally, the matter was very simple. Since the Gia sect was defeated, the Wind Demon clan could directly form an alliance with the Fengtian Fate sect. But now, because of the appearance of Devil's Knight, the ally had changed from the Fengtian Fate sect to the Fengtian sect. So, the problem was that the Fengtian sect had not been unified yet. The Fate sect and the Soul sect each had a beacon emperor. Which beacon emperor would be in charge? At this time, Wind Demon had completely calmed down. He glanced at Nietian and Devil's Knight and asked in a strange tone, "Lord Beacon Emperors, you want to form an alliance with the Wind Demon clan. Do you mean to represent your own sect or the Fengtian sect together?" he asked. Wind Demon had already let go of the fact that Nietian had injured Feng Kuan. Moreover, he had no choice but to let go of the current situation. What he did not expect was that, after the appearance of Devil's Knight, there would be such a dramatic turn of events. From Devil's Knight and Nietian, Wind Demon had already seen the huge potential of the Fengtian sect. Therefore, from this point of view, the alliance between the Wind Demon's clan and the Fengtian sect was very beneficial. Naturally, it's to jointly represent the Fengtian sect. Without waiting for Nietian to speak, Devil's Knight beat him to it, saying, "This emperor has already said, there will always be reunion, and there will always be unity. The Fengtian sect has been separated for so long, it should have long been unified." His tone was light, but it was full of vigor, giving off a very unyielding feeling. Wind Demon was not surprised, because he had already guessed that Devil's Knight would say this, so he coughed dryly and said, "Then may I ask, who will be in charge? Let's make decisions together." This time, Devil's Knight wasn't too forceful. Instead, he smiled and said, "That's good." Wind Demon was stunned for a moment, thinking that Devil's Knight would forcefully suppress Nietian and act arbitrarily. Then, Wind Demon's gaze swept across the elders and said in a clear voice, "Everyone, this clan leader has decided to form an alliance with the Fengtian sect. We will support each other, benefit each other, share weal and woe, and form an alliance forever. Do you have any objections?" As soon as he finished speaking, everyone nodded in agreement. They had already seen the strength of Nietian and Devil's Knight. With two such young and terrifying beacon emperor, why would they worry that the Fengtian sect wouldn't rise? However, they were also a little worried that the Fengtian sect would have internal strife. Now that the Fengtian Fate sect and the Fengtian Soul sect had yet to be unified, the existence of two beacon emperors at the same time was a big problem. As the saying goes, two tigers cannot live on the same mountain. Between Nietian and Devil's Knight, only one could be the beacon emperor. The other would either lower his position or leave in dejection. Based on the current situation, Devil's Knight's strength was stronger and his methods were also sharper. He seemed to have an advantage over Nietian. However, Nietian was the beacon emperor of the Fate sect. Back then, the Fate sect was already far stronger than the Soul sect. It was unknown how the Soul sect behind Devil's Knight was compared to the current Fate sect. If the Soul sect was weaker than the Fate sect, then Nietian would still have a chance. Nietian glanced at Devil's Knight and a bitter smile flashed across the corner of his mouth. Devil's Knight had just arrived and had already shown his ambition. How could he be on equal footing with him? Between the two of them, there would definitely be a struggle for the position of Beacon Emperor. However, now that they were in the territory of the Wind Demon's clan, the two of them had to at least maintain a superficial peace. The Wind Demon looked at Nietian and Devil's Knight and said with a faint smile, "Two Beacon Emperors, my clan is willing to form an alliance with the Fengtian sect. Both sides will be equal and mutually beneficial. What do you think?" In fact, he was very satisfied with the current situation. At that time, he had suggested for the Gia sect to compete with the Fengtian Fate sect because he had lost his mind due to the matter with Feng Kuan. Now that he thought about it, rather than being a vassal of the Gia sect, it was better to be an ally of the Fengtian sect. Yes. Nietian nodded in agreement. This was what he and the Wind Demon's clan had agreed on before. They would be equal and mutually beneficial. Wind Demon clan leader, what do you think about the Fengtian sect compared to the Gia sect? Devil's Knight asked with a strange smile. Wind Demon was stunned at first and said, "Why would Beacon's Emperor ask such a question? Didn't the battle just now prove it? The Gia sect has already been defeated by the Fengtian sect." Devil's Knight nodded and said, "I heard that the Wind Demon's clan and the Gia sect are not in an alliance on equal footing. Instead, they are dependent on the Gia sect." Beacon's Emperor, what do you mean by that? No matter how stupid the Wind Demon was, he could tell what Devil's Knight was implying. His face darkened and he asked cold. Since the Wind Demon's clan is willing to be a vassal of the Gia sect, why can't they be a vassal of the Fengtian sect, which is stronger than the Gia sect? Devil's Knight laughed and said with confidence, "You!" The Wind Demon's eyes trembled. He was so angry that he could not speak. He did not expect Devil's Knight to be so overbearing. He wanted to change something that had already been decided. "Clan leader, please calm down." At this moment, the great elder Feng Yaoxing stood up and looked at Nie Tian. "Life sect Beacon Emperor, what do you think?" With Devil's Knight's overbearing attitude, it was impossible to persuade him. Hence, he could only turn to Nie Tian for help. "Devil's Knight, I've already agreed with the Wind Demon's clan that we'll form an alliance and have equal status. You didn't raise any objections before the battle, but now you're changing your previous proposal. It doesn't seem appropriate." Nie Tian frowned and looked at Devil's Knight. He asked himself honestly, as the Beacon Emperor of the Fengtian life sect, he certainly hoped that the Wind Demon's clan could submit to the Fengtian sect and become a vassal force. However, since some things had been agreed upon, how could he go back on his word? "That's what you said to them, not me." Devil's Knight sneered and asked, "Do you think it's possible for a dragon and a snake to cooperate and have equal status?" Nie Tian's face darkened and looked very ugly. As a member of the Fengtian sect, it didn't seem right for him to forcefully oppose Devil's Knight. However, if he supported Devil's Knight, he would be going back on his word. It was wrong to stand on either side. "Beacon's Emperor, if you insist, then my Wind Demon's clan will not form an alliance with your soul sect. We can only form an alliance with the life sect." Wind Demon suddenly stood up and said in a cold voice. Unexpectedly, Devil's Knight also stood up and asked coldly, "The Fengtian sect is originally one, but the Wind Demon's clan wants to divide the soul sect and the life sect. Do you want to split the Fengtian sect?" This. Feng Yaoxing saw that the two were at daggers drawn and his old face was stiff and embarrassed. He couldn't help but look at Nie Tian again. Nie Tian also looked awkward. After thinking for a while, he still stood up. Chapter 44-38. When Devil's Knight saw Nie Tian stand up, he didn't wait for the latter to speak and said, "Nie Tian, I have to remind you that you are the Beacon Emperor of the Fengtian Fate sect." After all, the matter in front of them was related to the interests of the sect. How could Nie Tian, the Beacon Emperor, speak up for the Wind Demon's clan? Even though Nie Tian had promised the two sides to form an alliance on equal terms, the situation had changed at this time. The target of the alliance had changed from the Fengtian Fate sect to the Fengtian sect. It was normal for the status of both sides to change when the target of the alliance changed. Nie Tian looked at Devil's Knight and asked, "Devil's Knight, your ambitions shouldn't be limited to the Fengtian sect, right?" "Of course." Devil's Knight smiled and said, "If I were in charge of the Fengtian sect, I would be able to make the Fengtian sect dominate the 7 cultivators of true virtue within a year." A year? Hearing Devil's Knight's words, everyone's expression changed and they were filled with shock and doubt. The Gia sect had risen for thousands of years, but it had yet to dominate the 7 cultivators of true virtue. The Fengtian sect had declined for a long time, so why did Devil's Knight say that he could make the Fengtian sect dominate the 7 cultivators of true virtue within a year? If someone else had said such words, everyone would have already burst into laughter. However, since Devil's Knight said it, it seemed to be possible. After all, Devil's Knight had already proven his strength to everyone. His words could not be judged by common sense. Nie Tion's gaze slightly sank and he lightly said, "If the Feng Tian sect wants to dominate the 7 cultivators of true virtue, the Gia sect should be the first target to be eradicated." Devil's Knight immediately understood Nie Tion's meaning. The corners of his mouth curled into a confident smile as he said, 3 months. In just 3 months, the Gia sect will no longer exist in the sacred world of 7 cultivators. This. Wind Demon's expression changed, and he was shocked, speechless. Could Devil's Knight be a lunatic? Eradicating the Gia sect, which had been entrenched in the 7th cultivator of true cultivators for hundreds of thousands of years, in just 3 months, wasn't that just nonsense? After all, the Feng Tian sect had been in decline for a long time, and its previous foundation had been almost exhausted. He really didn't know where Devil's Knight got his confidence from. 3 months, Nie Tian pondered for a moment, then smiled faintly and said, "How about this, let's use 3 months as the deadline. If the Feng Tian sect could destroy, annex, or subdue the Gia sect within 3 months, the Wind Demon's clan would have to rely on the Feng Tian sect. If not, the 2 sides would form an alliance, and their status would be equal. How about it?" "Okay." Devil's Knight smiled faintly and readily agreed. Wind Demon's expression sank, and he looked at Feng Yaoxing and the others. The Wind Demons and the others did not speak, and the atmosphere was somewhat silent. In the end, it was Feng Yaoxing who broke the silence and took the lead to say, "Patriarch, I think that the Fate Sect's Beacon Emperor's proposal is not impossible." This was a concession, and it even carried a strong sense of humiliation. However, this was a step that had to be taken. Feng Yaoxing opened his mouth, not because he was weaker than the others, but because he understood the depth of the situation better than the others. This was the most Nie Tian could do for them. Devil's Knight was too strong, and his strength was strange and unfathomable. He easily created the first puppet, and no one knew whether there would be a second puppet, a third puppet, and so on in the future. If the Wind Demon's clan did not accept Nie Tian's proposal, it would definitely anger Devil's Knight. Since Devil's Knight could say that he would subdue the Gia sect within 3 months, no one knew how powerful the Feng Tian soul sect behind it was. In other words, if the Feng Tian sect could really subdue the Gia sect, then the Wind Demon's clan would not suffer a loss if they relied on the Feng Tian sect. "I agree." Wind Demon was silent for a long time, but he finally opened his mouth and added, "However, within these 3 months, the Wind Demon's clan will only be an ally of the Feng Tian sect, not a vassal." "Okay." Devil's Knight smiled faintly, and there was even a hint of pride in his expression. Everything was within his expectations and under his control. Next, both parties signed an alliance agreement. The Feng Tian sect's side was signed by Devil's Knight and Nie Tian, while the Wind Demon's clan's side was signed by Wind Demon and Feng Yaoxing. "The alliance agreement has been signed. From now on, we are a family." There were 2 copies of the alliance agreement, and each party held one. Devil's Knight kept the alliance agreement and looked at Wind Demon with a playful smile. "Am I right, Wind Demon clan leader?" Wind Demon's expression was very ugly, but he still nodded. "Wind Demon clan leader, this is the letter that one clan leader asked me to bring to you." At this time, Nie Tian handed over a letter. It was given to Wen Luan by Wen Xiang, and Wen Luan asked him to deliver it on his behalf. Wind Demon took the letter, but he did not read it directly. Instead, he put it away. "The alliance is done. We will leave now." Nie Tian smiled faintly and was ready to leave. He visited the Wen clan and the Wind Demon's clan one after another. Although the results were a little unexpected, it was overall not bad. Nie Tian was ready to return to Feng Tian Fate sect immediately. Moreover, there were still many things that needed to be clarified between him and Devil's Knight. Wait. However, Devil's Knight did not want to leave. There was a sinister smile on his face as he looked at Wind Demon with a playful look. "Wind Demon clan leader, I heard that the power of your clan's bloodline is called the night-devouring snow cicada, right? Wind Demon frowned and was obviously a little wary. Why did Beacon's Emperor suddenly ask about this? I'm a little curious. Devil's Knight smiled again and said, I heard that the Wind Demon's clan cultivates a strange ancient martial art called the Eight Ghost Wind Dance. Only those with the night-devouring snow cicada bloodline can cultivate the Eight Ghost Wind Dance. A long time ago, the Wind Demon's clan relied on the Eight Ghost Wind Dance to become a heavenly clan. However, for some unknown reason, the night-devouring snow cicada bloodline of the Wind Demon's clan suddenly weakened. This also caused the overall strength of the Wind Demon's clan to weaken. In the end, they could only fall to a hidden clan in the Seventh Cultivator's sacred world. However, in the last few thousand years, the night-devouring snow cicada bloodline of the Wind Demon's clan suddenly became stronger. The Wind Demon's clan also became stronger. This might be the reason why the Wind Demon's clan chose to enter the world again. This emperor isn't wrong, right? Wind Demon frowned and his expression became very unsightly. He said in a cold tone, It seems that the Beacon's Emperor has done a very detailed investigation on our Wind Demon's clan. I wonder what is the purpose of the Beacon's Emperor doing this? To help you. Devil's Knight smiled faintly. His eyes were somewhat deep, as if hiding an extremely terrifying darkness. Help us? Wind Demon frowned and sneered. This clan leader can't tell that the Beacon's Emperor is a warm-hearted person. This emperor just said that since we have formed an alliance, we are naturally a family. Devil's Knight smiled again and said, This emperor doesn't want the Fengtian sect's allies to be too weak. Wind Demon's expression became even more gloomy. The disdain shown by Devil's Knight made him extremely disgusted. However, he suppressed the anger in his heart and said in a deep voice, I wonder how the Beacon's Emperor plans to help us? Moonlight Chalcedony. The corner of Devil's Knight's mouth twitched as he said a name. How do you know? When Wind Demon heard these words, his expression suddenly changed and he was stunned on the spot. Chapter 4439. When the Wind Demon heard Devil's Knight mention the Moonlight Chalcedony, he was stunned on the spot. The elders of the Wind Demon clan also looked at Devil's Knight in shock. Moonlight Chalcedony was the crux of the night-devouring snow cicada bloodline. However, this was the Wind Demon clan's greatest secret. Not to mention others, even among the Wind Demon clan, only the core higher-ups knew about it. How did Devil's Knight know about the Moonlight Chalcedony? Nyetian frowned and was secretly curious. What exactly was the Moonlight Chalcedony? Was it very important to the Wind Demon clan? The Moonlight Chalcedony is a naturally formed liquid amber. Its essence is a special liquid crystal formed by the condensation of the moonlight and the tears of the ice spring under special circumstances. Devil's Knight smiled faintly and explained the Moonlight Chalcedony. Nyetian half understood and didn't know anything about the Moonlight Chalcedony, amber, and tears of the ice spring. He guessed that the Moonlight Chalcedony should be some kind of light like a rainbow. As for amber and the tears of the ice spring, they should be some kind of treasure. You actually know the essence of the Moonlight Chalcedony. Wind Demon's eyes trembled and he was even more shocked. Of course. Devil's Knight smiled and said, The night-devouring snow cicada bloodline is an extremely strange, desolate bloodline. Unfortunately, only under the nourishment of the Moonlight Chalcedony can the night-devouring snow cicada become powerful. The reason why your Wind Demon clan was able to rank in the heavens was because of the Moonlight Chalcedony. It's just that later, the Moonlight Chalcedony became less and less, so the Wind Demon clan declined. I guess that the rise of your Wind Demon clan is also related to the Moonlight Chalcedony. Wind Demon calmed down slightly and the shock on his face was replaced by coldness. He said solemnly, This is just your guess. Devil's Knight smiled sinisterly and said, Wind Demon clan leader, let me guess again. The Moonlight Chalcedony used by the Wind Demon clan should be left behind by your ancestors. There should only be a very small amount and is completely insufficient to support the rise of the Wind Demons clan. This was also why the Wind Demons clan urgently needed to find a terrifying ally. Right? You. Wind Demon had just calmed down when his expression changed again. He was speechless. Without a doubt, Devil's Knight was right again. Wind Ghost clan leader, judging from your reaction, I should be right. Devil's Knight chuckled and said, actually, this is nothing. The Wind Demons are taking advantage of the fact that they still have some strength to find a powerful ally to rely on. There's nothing wrong with that. But, Clan Chief Wind Ghost, you can't possibly really think that a clan can maintain its peak for a long time by relying on other forces, right? This. Wind Demon's face turned ugly, the corner of his mouth twitched, unable to say a word. As the saying goes, if a person wants to stand firm, he doesn't need to find a backer, but to turn himself into a mountain. The same principle naturally applied to clans. The Wind Demons clan did have some strength now and could be relied on by some major forces. However, if one day, the Wind Demons clan declined, would they still be valued? However, Wind Demon had no choice because the Wind Demons clan's Moonlight Chalcedony was indeed very little. Not to mention supporting the Wind Demons clan to rise again, it was not even enough to support the Wind Demons clan for a generation. Devil's Knight was very right. The Moonlight Chalcedony that the Wind Demons clan used now was left behind by their ancestors in case the clan needed it. However, although these Moonlight Chalcedony were stored using a secret method, the quality had dropped a lot because it had been left for too long. If it was not used, the Moonlight Chalcedony would completely lose its effect in less than 10,000 years. Wind Demon could not understand why Devil's Knight knew so much about the Wind Demons clan. Could it be that Devil's Knight came for the Wind Demons clan? Wind Demon clan head, you don't have to be nervous. I don't have any ill intentions towards the Wind Demons clan. Devil's Knight seemed to see through what Wind Demon was thinking and said with a faint smile, I really want to help you all. Moreover, I know the secret method to develop the Moonlight Chalcedony. Really? Hearing Devil's Knight's words, Wind Demon could no longer remain calm. His eyes immediately became blazing, and he even showed unconcealable greed. Moonlight Chalcedony was a naturally formed item. Back then, the Wind Demons clan rose to power because they discovered a group of caves rich in Moonlight Chalcedony. However, the Moonlight Chalcedony in the group of caves was not inexhaustible either. As time passed, the Moonlight Chalcedony was used up, and the Wind Demons clan naturally declined. Of course, when the Wind Demons clan was powerful, they once sent people to specially investigate the essence of the Moonlight Chalcedony too, attempting to find a method to artificially develop the Moonlight Chalcedony. But sadly, at that time, the Wind Demons clan invited several dozen top-notch alchemists in the world, and they all did not comprehend the method to develop the Moonlight Chalcedony. Now, Devil's Knight actually said that he knew the secret method to develop the Moonlight Chalcedony. How could it not make Wind Demon agitated? Not just Wind Demon, the other Wind Demon clan members also started trembling with heated gazes, looking at Devil's Knight attentively. Nietion's brows furrowed, already roughly understanding the context of the matter. Moonlight Chalcedony was an essential item for the Wind Demons clan to cultivate the power of bloodline, and the Wind Demons clan already did not have much Moonlight Chalcedony. Right at this time, Devil's Knight appeared, and he even knew the secret method to develop the Moonlight Chalcedony. Such a coincidental matter, was it really just a coincidence? Faintly, Nietion felt that Devil's Knight was definitely brewing some grand scheme. Devil's Knight smiled faintly and naturally would not say the method to develop the Moonlight Chalcedony. Instead, he took out a finger-sized medicinal bottle, passed it to Wind Demon, and said, Wind Demon clan leader, what do you think about this bottle of Moonlight Chalcedony? Wind Demon's gaze trembled intensely. The hand holding the Moonlight Chalcedony medicinal bottle was also trembling slightly. He practically opened the medicinal bottle with trembling hands. Immediately, a fragrance overflowed. the fragrance assailing the nostrils, filling the entire assembly hall. When Nye Tian sniffed this scent, he immediately felt refreshed, as if every pore on his body opened up, wanting to absorb the essence within. While the reactions of Wind Demon and the rest were even more exaggerated. The expressions of the Wind Demon's clan members were lifeless, like they were in a dream or fantasy, as if they were situated in a dream. The bloodline power within their bodies, under the stimulation of the moonlight chalcedony, was actually pulsing non-stop, like a vicious wolf seeing a lamb. After a long time, Wind Demon and the rest finally calmed down slightly. Extremely reluctantly, they capped the medicinal bottle and returned it to Devil's Night. Wind Demon clan leader, this small bottle of moonlight chalcedony, just take it as my greeting gift to your Wind Demon clan. But Devil's Night smiled and indicated to Wind Demon to keep it, then said, "Now you should believe that I have the method to develop the moonlight chalcedony, right? Believe. Wind Demon chuckled as he put away the medicinal bottle, nodded repeatedly, and praised, "This clan leader has never seen moonlight chalcedony with such a rich aura before. Lord Beacon Emperor truly has the hands of heaven's work, seizing the good fortune of heaven and earth." This time, he removed the two words Soul Ancestor from his address of Devil's Night and added the word Lord behind it. The change in attitude was so fast that it left one speechless. Wind Demon clan leader, I'll tell you the truth. This small bottle of moonlight chalcedony is just a little bit of waste liquid left behind during the process of refining the moonlight chalcedony. What I possess in my hands is the purest moonlight chalcedony. Devil's Night laughed, an unusual light surging in his eyes. Chapter 44:40. What? The moment Devil's Night's words faded, a shrill strange cry sounded out in the Wind Demon clan's conference hall. This strange cry was precisely emitted by Wind Demon. He seriously could not control his emotions, that was why he directly cried out. The other members of the Wind Demon clan looked at Devil's Night with dazed faces. That expression was like looking at the god in their hearts. Nye Tian had a dumbfounded look. Was the moonlight chalcedony really so important to the Wind Demon clan? Actually, Nye Tian was not a member of the Wind Demon clan, so he was unable to understand the significance of the moonlight chalcedony to the Wind Demon clan. The Wind Demon clan's bloodline power was the devouring night snow cicada. But if the devouring night snow cicada did not have the nourishment of the moonlight chalcedony, it would be akin to a useless bloodline. It could not even compare to the most ordinary bloodline power. Furthermore, because of the existence of the devouring night snow cicada bloodline, the Wind Demon clan was also unable to breed other bloodlines. This way, under the circumstances where there was no moonlight chalcedony, not only could the devouring night snow cicada not become a help to the Wind Demon clan, it became the greatest obstruction instead. One might ask, those great family clans and great factions, as well as top powerhouses and pinnacle existences, which one did not possess powerful bloodline power. If there was no bloodline power, under the circumstances of the same realm, they would absolutely be crushed by the other party. Just take Nye Tian for example. The reason why he was powerful was precisely because of the power of stars and the power of gods and demons within his body. If Nye Tian did not have the power of stars and the power of gods and demons, then the current him would not be much stronger than martial artists of the same realm. This was the importance of bloodline power. Without bloodline power, one was bound to be unable to become a great family clan. The reason why the Wind Demon clan declined so quickly was because they did not have the moonlight chalcedony. And at this moment, Devil's Night claimed that he had the purest moonlight chalcedony in his hands. How could this not make the Wind Demon and the rest agitated? Sir Beacon Emperor, is what you said true? After a long while, Wind Demon finally calmed down and asked with a trembling voice, "Are you still doubting me?" Devil's Night chuckled and said, "Actually, your Wind Demon's clan has great potential. That's because what you're cultivating is the rare primordial ancient martial technique. But your bloodline power is too weak. Don't tell me. In order to bring out the true might of the 8 Ghost Winds dance, there are very few people who can completely grasp the 8 Ghost Winds dance. This Wind Demon's face stiffened, and he could not help but feel a little awkward. Indeed, there were only a few people in the entire Wind Demon's clan who could completely master the 8-wind ghostly dance. Even at the peak of the Wind Demon's clan, not many people in the clan could truly comprehend the profoundness of the 8-gale ghost dance. Is the great desolate ancient martial technique very powerful? Nyetian frowned. He could not help but feel interested. Judging from Devil's Knight's words, the 8 Ghost Wind dance seemed to be very terrifying. Now that he thought about it, when he fought with Feng Kuan, the latter's night-devouring realm was indeed very powerful. Furthermore, Nyetian sensed that Feng Kuan did not release the power of the night-devouring realm. Otherwise, it would be hard to say who would have won that battle. As far as I know, the night-devouring snow cicada's bloodline is divided into 9 cries. Devil's Knight glanced at Wind Demon and continued, but in the Wind Demon's clan, not to mention the 9 cries bloodline, even the 3 cries bloodline is extremely rare, right? That's right. Wind Demon was completely convinced at this moment. He nodded deeply and said, "Currently, in our Wind Demon's clan, the one with the strongest bloodline power is my son, Feng Kuan, who possesses the 5 cries bloodline. However," as he spoke, Wind Demon could not help but look at Nyetian. Feng Kuan's bloodline was the strongest before, but after the battle with Nyetian, it was almost crippled. Feng Kuan only used the night-devouring realm, which slightly damaged his bloodline, but it's not impossible to recover. Devil's Knight smiled and said confidently. Nyetian furrowed his brows. He did not expect Devil's Knight to know about Feng Kuan's matter. It seemed that Devil's Knight had been in the Wind Ghost Valley for a long time. He should have personally witnessed the battle between Nyetian and Feng Kuan. "What did you say?" Wind Demon's expression was awkward. When he suddenly heard Devil's Knight's words, his expression suddenly changed and he exclaimed, "I can help him recover Feng Kuan's bloodline." Mo Yi smiled faintly and said calmly, "Sir Beacon Emperor, are you serious?" Wind Demon's eyes trembled violently. It seemed that he was about to cry. Feng Kuan was the #1 genius of the Wind Ghost race. Furthermore, he was the son he doted on the most. If he could restore Feng Kuan's bloodline, it wouldn't be impossible for the Wind Ghost race to bow down to him. Of course, Devil's Knight's expression was indifferent. He then smiled and said, "But I am not helping your Wind Demon's clan for free." Wind Demon's eyes trembled. His expression stiffened for a moment before returning to normal. He said, "Of course. If Sir Beacon Emperor has any conditions, just say it. As long as I can do it, I will not refuse." Devil's Knight laughed strangely. He stared straight at Wind Demon and said, "Actually, this matter is very easy for Wind Demon clan leader. It just depends on whether Wind Demon clan leader is willing or not." Wind Demon's eyes trembled and his heart couldn't help but sink. The more Devil's Knight said this, the less confident he was. Under normal circumstances, the easier it was said to be, the harder it was to do. "I want to recruit a batch of young geniuses for the Fengtian sect. I want to pick some from the Wind Demon's clan. I wonder if Wind Demon clan leader is willing?" Devil's Knight smiled again and said lightly, "Recruiting disciples from the Wind Demon's clan?" Wind Demon's eyes lit up. He nodded and said, "That's easy. Sir Beacon Emperor, just pick however many people you want." Nyetian's expression changed slightly. He guessed that Devil's Knight's request was not that simple. Recruiting disciples from the Wind Demon's clan was obviously a good thing. Devil's Knight didn't need to mention it as a condition. "Wind Demon clan leader, I don't need a lot of people. I only need 900. Devil's Knight smiled and said, "And these 900 people will be taught by me personally." However, at this point, Devil's Knight couldn't help but pause for a moment. "However what?" Wind Demon's heart skipped a beat and he asked anxiously. However, from now on, these 900 people will have nothing to do with the Wind Demon's clan. Devil's Knight smiled again. His eyes instantly became a little cold as he stared straight at Wind Demon. This Wind Demon's expression changed, and he couldn't say anything for a moment. How could he not understand that Devil's Knight wasn't recruiting disciples for the Fengtian sect? Instead, he wanted to take away 900 people from the Wind Demon's clan. And from now on, these 900 people would have nothing to do with the Wind Demon's clan at all. Anyone could tell that Devil's Knight definitely didn't want these 900 people for good. After a moment of silence, Wind Demon asked in a deep voice, "If my Wind Demon's clan sends these 900 people to Sir Beacon Emperor, will Sir Beacon Emperor be able to tell us the research method of the lunar rainbow chalcedony?" "Of course," Devil's Knight smiled faintly and said, "I'll send someone to send the research method over and teach you. How about that?" "Good." Wind Demon's eyes were gloomy and cold. After a few seconds of silence, he spat out a word. Chapter 44-41. Finally, Wind Demon agreed to Devil's Knight's condition. The lives of 900 people in exchange for a bright future for the clan. This deal was worth it. But would these 900 people feel that it was worth it? After a moment of silence, Great Elder Feng Yaoxing stepped forward and asked with an ugly expression, "Sir Beacon Emperor, what kind of people are you looking for?" The other elders' expressions were also a little ugly. Exchanging the lives of the clan's descendants for the clan's future made them feel a deep sense of shame. "I will personally pick those under 16 years old." Devil's Knight smiled faintly with a confident expression. "Under 16 years old?" Feng Yaoxing's expression changed as he was quite surprised. Wind Demon and the other elders were also stunned as they looked at Devil's Knight in confusion. Devil's Knight actually wanted children under 16 years old. What was he trying to do? "Why can't I?" Devil's Knight didn't care about everyone's surprise and asked with a gloomy expression. Wind Demon revealed a troubled expression and said, "Sir Beacon Emperor, to be honest, the Wind Demon clan has been in decline for a long time. The number of people in the clan has also decreased. There might not be 900 children under 16 years old. Then, under 30 years old." Devil's Knight thought for a moment and said with a deep voice, "This, all right." Wind Demon was silent for a moment and finally nodded. Since the decision had been made, it was useless to be indecisive. He would just treat it as these 900 people sacrificing themselves for the clan. "Wind Demon clan leader, please get someone to prepare. I will go pick the people later." Devil's Knight was very blunt and said directly. Wind Demon agreed and asked an elder to make the arrangements. Then, he asked anxiously, "Sir Beacon Emperor, may I know when you plan to treat Feng Kuan? Bring him here." Devil's Knight said with a smile. "Ah, all right." Wind Demon was stunned for a moment, almost unable to react. He immediately nodded and had an elder lead the way. Nie Tian looked at Devil's Knight, not knowing what the latter wanted to do. It was obvious that Devil's Knight's goal was not simple. Moreover, after meeting Devil's Knight this time, Nie Tian felt that the former had changed a lot. The previous Devil's Knight was even darker, the kind of pure and direct darkness. However, at this moment, apart from the darkness, there was an even greater gloominess in the demonic knight. In fact, it had even become extremely shrewd. It had to be said that Devil's Knight had grown a lot in such a short period of time. This kind of growth was not only in strength, but also in temperament and willpower. A moment later, Feng Kuan was brought over and placed on the floor of the hall. He was still unconscious. "Sir Beacon Emperor, please make your move." Wind Demon couldn't wait any longer. Devil's Knight wasn't in a hurry. He looked at Feng Kuan for a long time and suddenly said, "Wind Demon Chief, I have a small selfish wish. I wonder if Wind Demon Chief agrees?" "Sir Beacon Emperor, please say it." Wind Demon was very anxious as he was afraid that Devil's Knight would suddenly stop treating Feng Kuan. "I want to take Feng Kuan as my disciple." Devil's Knight looked up at Wind Demon and said seriously. This. Wind Demon was stunned and couldn't react for a moment. Wind Demon Chief, do you think it's not good? Devil's Knight frowned and asked. Of course not, of course not. Wind Demon quickly denied and said, It's Feng Kuan's fortune to be a disciple of Sir Beacon Emperor. I agree on his behalf. Okay. Devil's Knight smiled again and immediately started to treat Feng Kuan. Waves of spiritual energy surged out from Devil's Knight's fingertips and formed runes in the air that then seeped into Feng Kuan's body. Nie Tian sensed Feng Kuan's aura and was shocked to find that the latter's damaged bloodline was actually recovering at a fast pace. This is the power of the soul line, Fat Cat said in a deep voice. Isn't the soul line the power of the spiritual energy? How can it repair the damaged bloodline? Nie Tian was puzzled. Although he didn't know much about the Heavenly Path's soul lattice, he knew that the soul lattice contained the power of the spiritual energy. How could it be helpful to the bloodline? I find it strange too. Fat Cat shook her head and said, Perhaps there's something strange about the night-devouring snow cicada's bloodline. Nie Tian nodded slightly and didn't say anything else. After a while, Devil's Knight took a deep breath and finished the treatment. At the same time, Feng Kuan woke up. Nie Tian. As soon as he opened his eyes and glanced around, he saw Nie Tian, and was so startled that he jumped to his feet, his face filled with terror. So the number one prodigy is such a coward. Nie Tian smiled helplessly. I'm not dead? Feng Kuan heaved a sigh of relief. He looked around again and finally calmed down, but he was still in shock. He clearly remembered that Nie Tian broke his night-devouring boundary, so why wasn't he dead? Kuan you're not dead, and your bloodline has recovered. Wind Demon was very happy and laughed. He had already sensed that Feng Kuan's bloodline had recovered and his aura had even become stronger. Mo Yi was indeed not an ordinary person. He had heaven-defying methods. Feng Kuan was stunned for a while before he calmed down. He suddenly saw Devil's Knight and noticed that he looked very similar to Nie Tian. He asked, Who are you? Good disciple, hurry up and greet your master. Mo Yi clasped his hands behind his back and said with a faint smile, Master? Feng Kuan's expression changed and he sneered. Who do you think you are? How dare you ask me to be your master? Kuan don't be rude. Wind Demon's expression changed and he shouted. It's fine. Devil's Knight waved his hand and looked at Feng Kuan. Feng Kuan, do you think that my cultivation level is too low and I'm not qualified to be your master? I, Feng Kuan, am the top genius of the Wind Demon's clan. I've reached the 9th Celestial Enlightenment Realm, and I'm one step away from the Celestial Ancestor Realm. You're only in the 9th Celestial Tribulation Realm. You're just an ant in my eyes. What makes you think you can be my master? If it weren't for the presence of Feng Gui, Ling Yun, and the others, he would have already killed this arrogant brat in front of him. You're right. Mo Yi couldn't help but laugh. He continued, but one's realm is only one aspect of strength. My cultivation level is low, but that doesn't mean I'm weak. Do you believe that I can make you kneel down and kowtow to me right now? You're courting death. Feng Kuan's expression darkened and he roared. His chi surged. Feng Kuan, kneel. However, in the next moment, Mo Yi shouted loudly, his face gloomy and murderous. Feng Kuan's body shook and he felt his soul trembling as if it was struck by lightning. His knees softened and he knelt in front of Devil's Knight. What a powerful divine soul! Nie Tian's eyes flickered with astonishment. He could see that Devil's Knight was using his soul to force Feng Kuan to kneel. This kind of absolute suppression was too terrifying. Even the best alchemists and sealing masters couldn't do it. It seemed like Devil's Knight's soul was more terrifying than Nie Tian had imagined. Chapter 44-42. Devil's Knight shouted. Feng Kuan couldn't bear the powerful soul force and knelt on the spot. Everyone's expression changed. They looked at Devil's Knight in shock as if they were looking at a monster. Win no matter what. Feng Kuan was a peerless genius with extraordinary willpower. However, in front of Devil's Knight, he was played like a puppet. You! Feng Kuan knelt on the ground, but he raised his head. His eyes were bloodshot. It was obvious that he was trying to resist. However, no matter what, he couldn't stand up. His legs seemed to be immobilized. Kowtow. Mo Ye's lips curled into a cold smile as he spoke indifferently. Then, Feng Kuan actually started to bend down and his forehead slowly touched the ground. Crowd seeing this scene, shock was written all over their faces. Everyone could see that Feng Kuan was being suppressed by Devil's Knight and was forced to kneel. To be able to do this, it was enough to show how terrifying Devil's Knight was. Nyeheaven couldn't help but frown. This was the first time he had seen someone force someone to become his disciple. Feng Kuan had always been arrogant and unreasonable. Unfortunately, in front of Devil's Knight, he could only kneel and kowtow. Kowtow and become my disciple. Now you are my disciple. Devil's Knight laughed and released the soul force that he had placed on Feng Kuan. I will tear you apart. However, in the next moment, Feng Kuan broke free from the control and roared. Like a ferocious tiger, he clenched his fist and attacked Devil's Knight. Kuaner, quickly stop. Wind Ghost Lingyun's expression suddenly changed. He cried out in alarm, but it was already too late to stop him. He wasn't afraid that Feng Kuan would hurt Devil's Knight. He was afraid that Feng Kuan would anger Devil's Knight and be killed by the latter. However, he had seen Devil's Knight turn the vice leader of Gia's sect into a puppet. How could he be hurt by Feng Kuan? Impudent! Devil's Knight stood with his hands clasped behind his back. His expression darkened as he let out a low roar. Following which, he struck out with his palm, breaking apart Feng Kuan's attack. After that, his silhouette flickered and appeared behind Feng Kuan, directly grabbing his neck. You! Feng Kuan turned pale with fright, but his throat was tightly strangled. His face was flushed red, and he was unable to speak. He didn't expect Devil's Knight's strength to be so strong. The instant it erupted, it was like a landslide or a tsunami. Feng Kuan, do you know how to respect a master like a father? Mo Ye's expression was gloomy and cold as he said in a heavy tone, killing me is the same as killing your father. Even if I kill you now, the leader of the Wind Ghost clan wouldn't dare to say anything. Lord Beacon Emperor, please show mercy. Wind Demon felt the murderous intent in Devil's Knight's eyes and was so scared that his face turned pale as he hurriedly shouted. But he didn't dare to make a move. Not only because Devil's Knight held the secret of the Moonlight Chalcedony, but also because Devil's Knight's strength was too strange. Lord Beacon Emperor, Feng Kuan was just impulsive. Please punish him severely. Don't kill him. Feng Yaoxing also spoke, almost begging. When Feng Kuan's face turned red. Under the pressure of the big hand, the blood in his body stopped flowing. But at this moment, other than fear, there was more shock and confusion in his heart. He didn't understand why Wind Demon and Feng Yaoxing would be so afraid of Devil's Knight. This was the meeting hall of the Wind Demon's clan. Even if the leader of the Gia sect came personally, he wouldn't dare to be so arrogant. Also, he couldn't figure out Devil's Knight's identity at all. Wingui Lingyun and Feng Yaoxing addressed Devil's Knight as Lord Beacon Emperor. This was too strange. Wasn't Feng Tian sect's Beacon Emperor Nye Tian? When did he become Devil's Knight? And Devil's Knight's appearance was too similar to Nye Tian's. Were they brothers? Questions lingered in his mind. Feng Kuan even forgot that his life was still in someone else's hands. Nye Tian watched quietly at the side. He didn't speak, nor was he anxious. He knew that Devil's Knight couldn't possibly kill Feng Kuan. Otherwise, he wouldn't have spent so much effort to treat the latter. Demon Knight must have a deeper reason for being interested in Feng Kuan. Perhaps, he wanted to make Feng Kuan into another soul lattice puppet. Devil's Knight's face was gloomy, but he still released Feng Kuan in the end. This time, Feng Kuan didn't dare to move. He looked at Devil's Knight in fear. He was obviously more afraid than when he saw Nyetian. It's good that you know fear. Devil's Knight sneered and said to Wind Demon, Wind Demon clan leader, let him stay by my side for this period of time. Okay. Although Wind Ghost Lingyun was somewhat reluctant, he still nodded in agreement. Feng Kuan's expression was a little fearful, but he didn't dare to speak. Then Devil's Knight said a few more things to Wind Demon before leaving with Nyetian. Nyetian and Devil's Knight brought everyone out of the Wind Demon Valley. Their visit to the Wind Demon's clan this time was more daunting than dangerous. At least, the final result was acceptable. However, Devil's Knight's sudden appearance caught Nyetian off guard. The Fengtian Soul Sect's appearance also brought a great threat to the unstable Fengtian Fate Sect. This time, Nyetian could be said to be truly faced with internal and external troubles. Nyetian, there is bound to be a fight between us for the position of Beacon Emperor. However, for the sake of the Fengtian sect, I don't want both of us to suffer losses. How about we have a fight between gentlemen? Devil's Knight suddenly said when they were about to reach the Fengtian Fate sect. A fight between gentlemen? Nyetian frowned and couldn't help but find it funny. Demon Knight was such a despicable person, yet he still brought up the idea of a gentleman's dispute. Yes. Devil's Knight laughed with a strange light in his eyes. The fight between us for the position of Beacon Emperor is not only about us, but also the future of the Fengtian sect. If that's the case, why don't we give the right to compete to our respective sects? What do you mean? Nyetian frowned with a dark expression. It's very simple. You and I will each choose 3 disciples from our sections. We'll fight each other in pairs. 2 out of 3 wins. Moyi smiled again. He couldn't help but glance at Feng Kuan. Nyetian's expression sank and immediately fell into silence. Devil's Knight's suggestion was a good idea. Once the Fengtian sect was unified, there could only be one Beacon Emperor. However, Nyetian wasn't completely confident in fighting against Devil's Knight. No, if he chose someone from the sect to fight, it would be a great risk. Indeed, the Fengtian Fate sect had many outstanding disciples, but they weren't very strong. They couldn't even be considered top geniuses in the 7th sacred world of cultivators. But Devil's Knight could casually accept disciples. Furthermore, he could accept very strong disciples, such as Feng Kuan. Just think about it, Wen Luan already had a hard time defeating Feng Li, so how could he fight against Feng Kuan? How about this, we can broaden our choices. Not only can we choose cultivators from the sect, we can also choose cultivators from other places. At this time, Devil's Knight seemed to have seen through Nyetian's doubts. He laughed and said, but there is a prerequisite. The cultivators must be young and below 10,000 years old. Chapter 44-43. Nyetian looked at Devil's Knight, fell silent for a moment, and then nodded. Since he had broadened his choices, Nyetian felt that his chances would be greater. Feng Kuan was strong, but if he fought against Tang 13, what would his chances of winning be? Okay, it's a deal. Devil's Knight smiled happily, looking very proud of himself for having succeeded in his scheme. Nyetian frowned, feeling a little worried in his heart. Demon for Knight to be so confident, it meant that he already had a suitable candidate in mind. Could it be that Devil's Knight had a genius stronger than Feng Kuan? Very soon, Nyetian and the others arrived above the Heaven Beacon mountain range. Nyeheaven originally wanted to bring Devil's Knight to meet the higher-ups of the Fengtian sect. After all, as the Beacon's emperor, Devil's Knight shared the same origin as the Fengtian sect. After returning to the Fengtian sect, it was better to get to know each other. The sky was a bit strange. It seemed that Devil's Knight came alone, and there was no one else from the Sky Beacon Soul sect around him. But yes, Devil's Knight only roughly observed the Heaven Beacon mountain range before preparing to leave. Where are you going? Nyetian was curious and couldn't help but ask. I want to pay a visit to Gia sect and will be back in a few days, Devil's Knight said with a faint smile. Visit the Gia sect? Nie Tian's expression changed when he heard this. Demon Knight had just gotten into a conflict with the people of Gia sect, and refined the vice sect leader of Gia sect into a soul puppet. Now, he was going to pay a visit to Gia sect. Wasn't he courting death? Don't worry. Since I dared to go to Gia sect, I have absolute confidence that I can return safely. Of course, Devil's Knight knew what Nie Tian was thinking. He smiled faintly and said, "Didn't you want to exchange the life of Gia sect's fourth elder for someone? If you trust me, then give me the fourth elder. I will use him to exchange for the person you want." No. Before Nie Tian could speak, Wenluan took a step forward and rejected him coldly. But Devil's Knight didn't even look at him. His eyes stared straight at Nie Tian, waiting for Nie Tian's answer. Okay. Nie Tian thought for a while and finally agreed. The elders were indeed used in exchange for warmth, and Nie Tian did not trust Devil's Knight. But thinking about it, the fourth elder was captured by the Devil's Knight, so the Devil's Knight probably wouldn't play any tricks. Wenluan's expression was gloomy, but he still handed the fourth elder over to Devil's Knight. Tang 13. Just as Mo was about to leave, he paused and looked at Tang 13. With a teasing smile, he said, "The thing inside your body is strong enough. You won't be able to suppress it soon." The seed of the Yellow River. Nie Tian's eyes flashed and he screamed in his mind. Demon Knight could tell that there was a seed of the Yellow River inside Tang 13. No, in the next moment, he calmed down. Devil's Knight had 9 soul pulses. His soul's power was so strong that even peak alchemists and array masters couldn't compare. It wasn't strange that he could see Tang 13's abnormality. "You don't need to worry," Tang 13 responded coldly. Hee. Devil's Knight smiled and said, "I have a way to suppress it. If you can't handle it, you can find me. But I have a condition." "What condition?" Nie Tian's expression darkened and he walked up. "I chose 3 people, and Tang 13 is one of them." Mo smiled faintly. After he finished speaking, his figure flashed and he left. Nie Sky and Tang 13's expressions froze. They couldn't react for a while. So, Devil's Knight had his eyes on Tang 13 and wanted her to fight on his behalf. But this way, wouldn't Tang 13 become Nie Tian's enemy? "You want me to fight on his behalf?" "In your dreams." After a while, Tang 13 laughed brightly, as if she didn't care. Nie Sky's expression was cold. He was really considering whether to make Tang 13 agree to Devil's Knight's condition. Huang, the seed of the Yellow River, contained Apocalypse 13's 3 souls of the Yellow River. They wanted to take over Tang 13's body. Devil's Knight had the strongest fate, which meant he had the strongest soul. Maybe he could really suppress the souls of the Yellow River. Nie Tian, I won't fight for him. Tang 13 knew what Nie Tian was thinking and said calmly but firmly. If he had to betray his friends, he would rather be taken over. Nie Tian inhaled deeply and smiled bitterly. He was too naive just now. With Devil's Knight's personality, even if Tang 13 agreed to his condition, would he really take care of the seed of the Yellow River for her? Perhaps he would turn Tang 13 into a soul puppet. Very soon, Nie Tian and the others returned to Feng Tianming sect. Nie Tian didn't want to tell them about Feng Tianming sect right away. He wanted to wait until Ling Shuang Wuchen was done with his closed-door cultivation. As for the alliance with the Wind Demon's clan, he only asked Fan Zhong to inform the other banner leaders and elders. Then, Nie Tian and Tang 13 went to the mountain gate that Feng Tianming sect had arranged for them. The two returned to their own rooms. "Nie Tian, are you worried about Devil's Knight?" In the room, Nie Tian was restless. Fat Cat's voice sounded. "Yes." Nie Tian nodded. Devil's Knight's sudden appearance completely messed up his original plan. He had already thought about expanding the Sky Beacon selection to the entire All-Heaven Sacred World. This way, while it was risky, it would also provide an opportunity for Feng Tianming sect to rise. As for the enemies that might be attracted, Nie Tian was also on guard. When the Sky Beacon sect's selection began, they would inform some experts in advance to stand guard for the Sky Beacon sect. Only the Sky Beacon selection could be completed without the appearance of the Human Emperor Palace. Even if the Human Emperor Palace really did appear, Fengtian sect could at least protect themselves. After all, they had the Sky Beacon stone statues. But Devil's Knight suddenly appeared and dragged Feng Tianming sect into it. Nie Tian had never imagined that there would be such an internal problem. Devil Knight's appearance meant the start of the battle for the Beacon Emperor. If Nie Tian lost to Devil's Knight, then the Feng Tian sect would have to give up. I don't understand. Why didn't he choose to fight me head-on? Why did he insist on a gentleman's competition? Nie Tian frowned in confusion. In his opinion, Devil's Knight's strength was almost unbeatable. Although Yanqing wasn't a peak expert, he was still in the 9th level of the Heaven Martial Realm. Yet, he was turned into a puppet by Devil's Knight. That was too terrifying. Since Knight was so powerful, why didn't he fight Nie Tian head-on? Nie Tian asked himself. At least, he didn't have the confidence to defeat an expert like Yanqing. According to Devil's Knight, he wanted to unify the Fengtian sect. He didn't want both sides to suffer losses. But this didn't seem to make sense. If it was a battle between Nie Tian and Devil's Knight, it wouldn't hurt the foundation of the Fengtian sect no matter who won. Nie Tian, do you think Devil's Knight is really as powerful as he looks? Fat Cat asked again. Chapter 44-44. What do you mean? Nie Tian was confused when he heard Fat Cat's words. Could it be that Devil's Knight isn't as strong as he looks? Nie Tian, think about it carefully. What did Devil's Knight rely on to defeat that sect master? Fat Cat asked with a strange expression. Soul runes and a strange formation. Nie Tian frowned. He still didn't understand what the little Fat Cat was trying to say. Soul runes are a type of spiritual energy. The formation also said, as for forcing Feng Koan to kneel, he also used spiritual energy. Nie Tian understood what Fat Cat was trying to say. You mean that Devil's Knight relied on divine soul power? His real strength isn't that strong. That's right. Fat Cat nodded and smiled. But he did control Feng Koan in an instant. Nie Tian frowned. He was confused when he recalled how Devil's Knight controlled Feng Koan. The two of them were very close at that time. They were competing on reflexes, movement techniques, and martial body power. Fat Cat smirked. Can't you also control Feng Koan in an instant at that distance? Nie Tian's eyes shone with excitement as he said, That's right. It seemed that Devil's Knight wasn't as strong as he looked. Nie Tian could control a low-level heavenly martial divine ancestor in an instant if they were at a close distance. Wind Feng Koan was a heavenly perception divine emperor. His martial body wasn't as strong as a low-level heavenly martial divine ancestor. Devil's Knight's divine soul power is so strong that even a heavenly martial divine ancestor can't resist it. Can I? Nie Tian was confused again. If a martial artist wants to defeat an opponent with the power of their soul, under normal circumstances, they need to have a soul power that far surpasses their opponent. Fat Cat's expression changed slightly before she said seriously, Devil's Knight has 9 soul veins, so his mental power should be at the ancient rank already. Judging from the way his divine soul suppressed Feng Koan, his psychic power should be around 60 ancient. 60 ancients. When Nie Tian heard this number, his expression changed. The size of one's mental power was determined by the initial rank, followed by the trillion, and then the ancient. 1 ancient 10 trillion, 1 trillion 10 levels. Demon Knight's spiritual energy had actually reached 60 ancient. This was simply too terrifying. He knew that some of the greatest alchemists and formation masters in the sacred world were only in their 50s or 60s. Logically speaking, the limit of a Sage Realm martial artist's mental power should be 100 ancient. However, it was extremely difficult to improve one's mental strength, especially in the later stages. And moreover, most martial artists who specialized in mental energy did not have a high martial Tao realm and a limited lifespan. Institute even a peak alchemy master and array master would only have 50 to 60 ancient mental energy. Demon Knight was so young, yet he possessed such a terrifying mental strength. It could be said to be terrifying. In the early days, Nye Tian had also cultivated spiritual energy, but later on, he mainly focused on martial arts and swordsmanship. Therefore, his psychic energy wasn't very high. Now it should only be around 10 ancient souls. However, for a 9th-level heavenly tribulation martial artist, 10 ancient mental strength was already considered very abnormal. 60 ancient psychic power is indeed very frightening, but it's definitely not to the point of being unbeatable. The fat cat laughed and said, "Spiritual power is not a very destructive power to begin with. No matter how strong a spirit is, it can't destroy a mountain." Nye Tian couldn't help but nod. God's soul power was mainly useful for things with souls, such as martial artists and sacred beasts. But for some inanimate objects, such as rocks and soil, the effect of soul power was very small. Small fat cat nodded slightly and continued. Even for cultivators, spiritual attacks are relatively weak. Only when your mental energy far surpasses your opponent can you deal a destructive blow to them. Therefore, with your 10 ancient mental energy, the possibility of Devil's Knight being able to deal a heavy blow to your soul is not high. Yanqing's mental energy shouldn't be weaker than mine, right? How could he be refined into a puppet by Devil's Knight? Nye Tian frowned and asked in confusion. As a martial artist's realm increased, their mental energy would naturally increase as well. Heaven A 9th-level Saint Ancestor Wu's mental energy should exceed 10 ancient souls. Indeed. The fat cat nodded and said, "That sect master was refined into a puppet by Devil's Knight. One reason was because of carelessness, and the other was because Devil's Knight's soul matrix runes and formations were too strong. That means that if Devil's Knight released his soul matrix runes and formations, it would be very difficult for me to resist?" Nye Tian's eyes trembled as he asked in shock. "Of course not." The fat cat shook its head and said, "The strength of a spiritual attack is not only related to the strength of a martial artist's mental energy, but also the martial artist's willpower and martial physique. Devil's Knight and you share the same origin, so his soul matrix runes are not much of a threat to you. Moreover, your willpower is much stronger than that sect master's. In addition, you have the eternal night demon fox, so it's impossible for Devil's Knight to defeat you with his soul matrix runes." Heaven's eyes immediately became blazing, and he slowly understood. Demon Knight should have known about this long ago, so he chose to avoid a direct battle with Nye Tian and suggested a gentleman's competition instead. Heaven Nye Tian understood. The fat cat smiled again and said, "Nye Tian, you have the strongest martial fate. This is true strength. Your martial physique is far stronger than Devil's Knight's, so in a direct battle, he is definitely no match for you." "Yes." Nye Tian nodded his head heavily, his eyes sharp and full of confidence. At this moment, he finally realized that he had almost given birth to an inner demon. One apart from talent and hard work, a martial artist's martial will was more important. Nye Heaven's martial will had always been tenacious and fearless, but this time, when he faced Devil's Knight, he felt timid. One must know that even when he faced Yang God Sword Emperor, Hyakuten and the others, and even when he faced Human Emperor, he did not feel the slightest bit of fear. Fortunately, the fat cat was there to guide Nye Tian. Otherwise, if Nye Tian had an inner demon, it would be troublesome. But in fact, this was nothing. After all, Devil's Knight was born from Nye Tian's inner demon. When Nye Tian faced Devil's Knight, it was naturally different from when he faced others. From a certain point of view, when Nye Tian fought Devil's Knight, it was like fighting himself. It was easy to beat others, but difficult to beat oneself. Nye Tian calmed down and a confident smile appeared on his face. Small the fat cat successfully guided Nyetian and did not say anything else. It went to rest. Nyetian took a deep breath and prepared to cultivate. He wanted to see if he could find an opportunity to break through to the heavenly insight realm. But at this moment, a shrill scream was suddenly heard. It was extremely ear-piercing. Tang 13. Upon hearing Tang 13's voice, Nyetian's expression flickered as he dashed out. Chapter 44-45. Ah! Inside a room of the mountain gate, screams of agony could be heard. It was like the cries of ghosts in the night. Dream little talk star. Nyetian dashed out of his room and arrived at Tang 13's room. What he saw stunned him. Inside the room, Tang 13 was holding his head with both hands. His face was a bloody mess and his eyes were cold. In the dark, they were frightening. Nyetian's heart skipped a beat. He knew that the seed of the underworld inside Tang 13's body was acting up. My head, it hurts, it hurts. Tang 13 grabbed his head with both hands. He clawed at his head, creating lines of blood. It was as if he wanted to rip his head open. He felt like there were thousands of needles piercing his head. He wanted to rip his head open and pull out all these annoying needles one by one. Tang 13, calm down. Nyetian stepped forward and held on to Tang 13's arms so that Tang 13 wouldn't be able to hurt him anymore. But this made Tang 13 even crazier. His eyes changed color and the eye of the ghost was activated. Not good. Nyetian's face changed color and he retreated. A ray of eye powers flashed by and left a deep wound on his face. Even his facial bones were cut off. Luckily, he reacted fast enough. Or else this eye blade would have sliced off half of his face. The damage caused by the eye of the ghost was something that even Nyetian, who had the 10th meridian, couldn't heal instantly. Enduring the pain, Tian rushed over and grabbed onto Tang 13 tightly. He pinned Tang 13 to the ground. Roar! Tang 13, on the other hand, was completely enraged. He let out a beast-like roar. Terrifying energy exploded from his body, and he tried to break free from Nyetian. However, Nyetian was far too powerful. No matter how hard Tang 13 tried, he couldn't break free. Nyetian, you can't stop me. Just then, Tang 13 let out a low growl. Her 2 arms were broken and blood dripped down her arms. Mori Shire. Nyetian's eyes widened. How could he not tell that this was not Tang 13's voice, but Mori Shire's? You didn't expect this, did you? You're unable to suppress my Yellow Springs soul so quickly. Ah! Mori Shire laughed crazily. His body resisted forcefully, disregarding everything else. No, this will hurt Tang 13. Nyetian saw that Tang 13's body was covered in wounds. If he didn't let go, Tang 13's body would be torn in half. None helpless, Nyetian let go of Tang 13. Nyetian, should I thank you for giving me an even more powerful martial body? Tang 13's face was covered in blood. Her eyes were as deep as the abyss as she stared at Nyetian. The voice that came out of her mouth was Mori Shire's. Mori Shire, don't you dare take over his body. Nyetian let out a low roar as he opened his demon eye. A demonic destruction seal shot out and attacked Tang 13's soul. Tang 13's body quivered, and she staggered back a few steps, almost losing her balance. In the next second, however, he stopped and snickered. Nyetian, you are hurting Tang 13's soul, not mine. If you want to continue, then bring it on. Nyetian's face was dark as his brain spun. This continuing was not a solution. He had to find a way to suppress the soul of Yellow Springs. But the soul of Yellow Springs was hidden deep inside Tang 13's soul. To suppress or destroy it was impossible, unless he disregarded Tang 13's soul and destroyed it. But, if he did that, Tang 13 would become a soulless person, no different from a walking corpse. But with Nyetian's current level of spiritual energy, it was not enough to destroy Tang 13's soul. Nyetian, are you thinking of destroying the soul of this body? Mori Shire laughed maniacally again. You can do that. But let me tell you, the one you will destroy in the end is Tang 13. Without Tang 13, I still have other souls of Yellow Springs. Can you find them one by one and destroy them? Ah! The maniacal laughter fell into Nie Tian's ears, making him anxious. What if I kill Tang 13 directly? Nie Tian suddenly took a step forward as a bold idea occurred to him. Tang 13 was a Star Lord. Even if he was killed, he could use the Forbidden Star Soul to be reborn. In the past, Tang 13 also died and was reborn using the Forbidden Star Soul. Nie Tian, you cannot take the risk. But at this time, the fat cat's voice sounded. The Forbidden Star Soul cannot be reborn indefinitely. Tang 13 is in a special state now. If his body is destroyed, his soul will most likely be devoured by the soul of Yellow Springs. Then what should we do? Nie Tian's face darkened. He did not know what to do. Difficult. Should he just watch as Mori Shire takes over Tang 13's body? Right now, the soul of Yellow Springs is only temporarily awake. It is not time to take over yet, the fat cat said in a low voice, making Nie Tian become cold. Yes. Nie Tian nodded. The sword intent in his body surged and he activated the 12 heaven-slaying sword array, trapping Tang 13. Under the impact of the 12 heaven-slaying sword array, the entire courtyard was destroyed. Even the entire mountain gate was shaking and on the verge of collapse. The huge commotion alerted people from the nearby mountain peak. Many martial artists showed up and looked at Nie Tian and Tang 13 with puzzled expressions. Who are these two guys? What are they doing? They should be fighting, and it looks like it's quite an intense fight. That silver-haired kid looks familiar. I think he's the guy who defeated Gia's sect not long ago. At this time, most people still didn't know Nie Tian's identity, but they had already recognized Nie Tian. They thought it was a battle between Nie Tian and Tang 13, and they thought it was going to be exciting. Nie Tian, you can't trap me. Inside the sword array, Tang 13 dashed left and right like a wild beast. In the blink of an eye, the sword array was broken into pieces. It looked like it could not hold on much longer. This sword array won't last much longer. Nie Tian frowned. Mori Shire didn't care about anything else as he tried to take over Tang 13's body. Just like that at this moment, a white holy light suddenly appeared in the sky. Heaven and earth are nothing special, heaven and earth Saint Seal. Following which, a loud and clear voice could be heard as a gigantic handprint appeared, descending from the sky like a mountain. Nie Tian instantly felt the heavy pressure, but he didn't panic. Instead, his silhouette flickered and he retreated. Boom! In the next second, the gigantic handprint landed. Heaven and earth shook, and the giant mountain gate shook as if it was about to collapse. You! Tang 13 raised her head, wanting to say something. However, her body shook and she collapsed onto the ground, unconscious. Tang 13. Nie Tian's silhouette flashed and he held Tang 13 up. He's fine. He just fainted. High up in the sky, a soft voice rang. Chapter 44-46. Nie Tian was overjoyed to see that it was Gu Ling Wuji. Speaking of which, he and Gu Ling Wuji had a deep relationship. Back then, during the Hidden Dragon battle, Nie Tian saw Gu Ling Wuji for the first time at the Haoyun auction house. Due to fate, the latter helped Nie Tian a lot. Moreover, Gu Ling Wuji and Nie Tian had a lot of connections. Gu Ling Wuji was one of the two sects of the Feng Tian sect, while Nie Tian was the Beacon Emperor. This relationship was obvious. Gu Ling Wuji was also Emo and Nie Qingwan's teacher and a good friend of Qing Qi. Only back then, Nie Tian never revealed his identity as the Beacon Emperor. Only previously, Nie Tian didn't know that Gu Ling Wuji was the sect master of the Feng Tian sect. He only sensed the Beacon Emperor's imprint on the latter and knew that the latter was a high-ranking member of the sect. Gu Ling Wuji had left the sect for many years. This time, he must have heard about the Feng Tian selection. The Fengtian selection was a major event of the sect. Even though Gu Ling Wuji had left the sect for many years, he didn't forget his identity. Nie Tian. Gu Ling Wuji was surprised to see Nie Tian. He smiled. I didn't expect you to be here too. Nie Tian nodded and smiled. He was a little embarrassed. Gu Ling Wuji clearly didn't know his identity as the Beacon Emperor. Gu Ling Wuji landed and glanced at Tang 13. He nodded. Your friend's situation isn't too optimistic. Senior Gu Ling, what did you see? Nie Tian knew that Gu Ling Wuji was an alchemist. In terms of alchemy, he was considered one of the top figures in the all-heaven sacred world. Perhaps he had a way to save Tang 13. Dang. Gu Ling Wuji had given the 9 origin fate pill to Nie Tian before. There's an extremely powerful spiritual force in his body. Its dark aura. It should be trying to take over his martial body. Gu Ling Wuji's expression wasn't good. This spiritual power made Gu Ling Wuji feel very strange. He had done some research on spiritual auras and had seen countless kinds of strange spiritual auras. However, the soul inside Tang 13's body was something he had never seen before. It did not seem to be a remnant soul, but a divine soul that was constantly growing stronger. But yes, in a body that did not belong to him, how could his soul become stronger? Generally speaking, the soul depended on the existence of the body. Therefore, when a martial artist's martial body became stronger, the soul would naturally become stronger as well. However, there were exceptions. For example, some souls that had reached a certain level of strength could break free from the limitations of the body and exist independently. But when the soul left the body, it could only maintain its original state at most. It was impossible for it to become stronger. The strange thing about Tang 13's divine soul power was that even without a body to rely on, it could still continue to grow stronger. It even posed a great threat to the divine soul of the original owner of the body. Of course, Gu Ling Wuji had seen some examples of remnant souls seizing the bodies of martial artists, but those were all remnant souls lying dormant, waiting for the body's original owner to be weak before seizing the body. The divine soul in 13's body was forcefully possessing him. This was too strange. Senior Gu Ling, can I have a word with you? Nie Tian saw that Gu Ling Wuji was deep in thought. He decided to tell him about Tang 13's situation and see if Gu Ling Wuji had any ideas. Let's go to Eyes Wuchi Peak. Gu Ling Wuji looked around and said with a smile. Okay. Nie Tian saw that they couldn't stay here anymore, so he happily agreed. A moment later, the two arrived at the Wuchi Peak. The Wondrous Peak was one of the main peaks of the school, but it was far away from the other peaks in a secluded area. I never liked noise, so he chose this place. Gu Ling Wuji came to a familiar place and couldn't help but feel sad. His expression was slightly strange. The heavens could tell that Gu Ling Wuji had recalled many things in the past. I have been away from the sect for so many years, but the sect is still able to preserve Wuchi Peak. I am very pleased. After a while, Gu Ling Wuji calmed down and laughed heartily. With that, Nie Tian placed Tang 13 flat on a bluestone table. Gu Ling Wuji walked over and examined her carefully. He said, Nie Tian, tell me about your friend. Nie Tian nodded and told him about Morishire and the Seed of Yellow Springs. The Seed of Yellow Springs, the soul of Yellow Springs. After listening to Nie Tian, Gu Ling Wuji's expression was a bit gloomy. He said in a low voice, I has lived for so long, but this is the first time I've heard of something like this. Senior, do you have any ideas? Nie Tian looked at Gu Ling Wuji with anticipation. Not yet. Gu Ling Wuji shook his head and said, My Qiankuan sacred seal has the effect of suppressing one's soul, but the soul of the yellow spring inside Tang 13's body is too terrifying, and it's growing rapidly. I'm afraid that the next time the soul of Yellow Springs acts up, even I's seal of heaven and earth won't be able to suppress it. Although Nie Tian was mentally prepared, He was still very disappointed when he heard Gu Ling Wuji's answer. Senior, how long can the seal of heaven and earth last? Taking a deep breath, Nie Tian asked. At most, 3 days. Gu Ling Wuji frowned and looked helpless. When he first cultivated the sacred art of heaven and earth, the seal of heaven and earth was said to be able to suppress souls, but he didn't expect that it couldn't suppress the soul of Yellow Springs. Nie Tian, don't be too anxious, there are still 3 days. I will study the soul of Yellow Springs in these 3 days, maybe I can find a way. Seeing Nie Tian's reaction, Gu Ling Wuji guessed Tang 13's importance to Nie Tian and comforted him. Thank you, Senior Gu Ling. Nie Tian nodded and bowed to express his gratitude. Oh right, Nie Tian, why are you at Feng Tianming sect? Gu Ling Wuji suddenly remembered something and asked with a strange expression. Take a look at my fate, Senior Guling. Nie Tian couldn't help but say with a smile. Gu Ling Wuji was startled. His divine sense moved and sensed Nie Tian's fate space. His expression immediately froze as if he was petrified. You are the Beacon Emperor? After a while, Gu Ling Wuji spoke again with a trembling voice. Before coming to Feng Tianming sect, he had already heard that the sect had found a new Beacon Emperor. But he didn't expect the new Beacon Emperor to be Nie Tian, whom he already knew. He could clearly sense that Nie Tian had 9 life veins in his body. Wasn't this the Beacon Emperor? Nie Tian nodded with a smile. He purposely hid his 10th life vein to avoid scaring Gu Ling Wuji. It's you. Gu Ling Wuji felt his mouth go dry and gulped with a startled expression. He had been with Nie Tian for 9 years but never realized that Nie Tian was the Beacon Emperor. Senior Guling, where are Emo and Nie Qingwan? Nie Tian suddenly thought of Emo and Nie Qingwan. They are at the academy. Gu Ling Wuji calmed down a bit and said, I is their teacher, but he can't always take care of them. That's true. Nie Tian nodded and smiled. He suddenly remembered something and asked, Senior Gu Ling, do you know about Feng Tianming sect? Please remember this book's domain name. Biaoshu. Com. Chapter 44-47. Feng Tian Soul Sect. Gu Ling Wuji's expression changed after hearing Nie Tian's words. He seemed to be panicking and asked, How do you know about the Soul Sect? It seems that Senior Gu Ling knows about it. Nie Tian didn't expect this reaction from Gu Ling Wuji. He nodded and told him about Devil's Night and the Feng Tian Soul Sect. The Soul Sect also has a Beacon Emperor. Gu Ling Wuji was even more surprised after hearing Nie Tian's words. Nie Tian nodded and couldn't help but be confused. With Gu Ling Wuji's temperament, he shouldn't be this excited. It's finally here. Gu Ling Wuji was silent for a moment before sighing. He seemed to have aged a lot in an instant with a helpless expression. Nie Tian had a strange expression and didn't understand what Gu Ling Wuji was talking about. Gu Ling Wuji sighed again and said, Actually, before I left the Feng Tian Fate sect, I was ordered by the sect to visit the Feng Tian Soul sect. Visit the Feng Tian Soul sect? Nie Tian's expression changed with shock. Original. Not only did Gu Ling Wuji know of the Feng Tian Soul sect's existence, he even visited them. Yes. Gu Ling Wuji nodded. At that time, the Feng Tian Fate sect was in a state of rapid decline. Someone suggested to let the Feng Tian Soul sect return to the sect and rebuild the Feng Tian sect to revitalize the Feng Tian sect. After some discussion, we decided to send me to visit the Feng Tian Soul sect. But at that time, the Feng Tian Soul sect had been in seclusion for a long time. I had to search for a long time before finally finding news about the Soul sect. When I finally found it, there were only a few dozen people in the entire sect. A few dozen? Nie Tian frowned and shook his head. A few dozen? The Feng Tian Soul sect was a part of the Feng Tian sect after all. It didn't make sense for there to only be a few dozen people. The Feng Tian Fate sect had been in decline for a long time, and there were still hundreds of thousands of people in the sect. Gu Ling Wuji helplessly nodded. Although there are only a few dozen people left in the sect, they are all powerful experts. I intended to recruit them and guarantee that they will become protectors or elders once they return to the sect. Moreover, the Fengtian Fate sect would be renamed to the Fengtian sect. This way, it can be considered as the unification of the two sects, rebuilding a complete Fengtian sect. But those dozens of people were very stubborn. Not only were they unwilling to return, but they also joined forces to injure me. However, they didn't kill me. Instead, they told me that the Black Soul sect would definitely wait for their Beacon Emperor. Furthermore, their Beacon Emperor would unify the Fengtian sect and revive the Beacon Sky. At this point, Gu Ling Wuji couldn't help but let out a long sigh. They said that this is the prophecy of the Soul sect, and it will definitely come true. After so many years, I almost forgot about this prophecy. Who would have thought that they would actually find their own Beacon Emperor? After saying that, Gu Ling Wuji's expression was a little strange. He looked at Nye Tian hesitantly. The Soul sect finding the Beacon Emperor might not necessarily be a bad thing for the Fengtian sect. Nye Tian nodded and said, as long as the Fengtian sect can be revived, it doesn't matter who the Beacon Emperor is. He was a little puzzled. What Gu Ling Wuji said was actually nothing much. If this prophecy was true, it would not be a bad thing for the Fengtian sect. It's as a matter of fact, Nye Tian wasn't too greedy towards the Beacon Emperor. He wasn't someone who craved power anyway. Only this Beacon Emperor could not be given to the Devil's Knight. Demon Knight was the person who understood Nye Tian the most in this world, and Nye Tian was also the person who understood Devil's Knight the most in this world. With Devil's Knight's dark and ruthless personality, once he took control of the Fengtian sect, he would probably develop the Fengtian sect into a huge killing machine. Or perhaps the Fengtian sect would really rise, but this rise would definitely be unimaginably bloody. Nyeheaven didn't understand why Gu Ling Wuji's was so heavy just because of this prophecy. Gu Ling Wuji looked at Nye Tian and hesitated for a long time before finally saying, the Soul sect's prophecy doesn't stop there. What else? Nye Tian's gaze darkened. It seemed that things weren't so simple. The Soul sect's people said that the Fate sect and the Soul sect will both find their own Beacon Emperor. However, the two Beacon Emperors will fight for the Beacon Emperor's position, and their Beacon Emperor will kill our Fate sect's Beacon Emperor and become the true master of the Beacon Sky. Gu Ling Wuji's gaze slightly trembled, and he seemed a little excited. Nye Tian frowned, but didn't have much of a reaction. The so-called prophecies all carried a strong sense of destiny. And he, Nye Tian, had never believed in destiny. Looking at the current situation, the Soul sect's people were indeed right. Both Beacon Emperors had appeared, and it was extremely likely that a life-and-death battle would break out. However, it was still unknown who would win and who would lose this battle. Devil's Knight was very strong, but he, Nye Tian, wasn't weak either. Indeed, it's only a prophecy. It was I who took it too seriously. Feeling Nye Tian's confidence and momentum, Gu Ling Wuji couldn't help but calm down. He took a deep breath and returned to normal. Senior Gu Ling, don't worry. My life is tough, and I won't die so easily. Nye Tian laughed with an indifferent expression. Yes. Gu Ling Wuji nodded his head. Then, he thought of something and couldn't help but laugh. There's another strange thing about the Soul sect's prophecy that I still can't figure out. What is it? Nye Tian laughed and asked. The Soul sect's people said that the Beacon Emperor that the Soul sect and the Fate sect are looking for is the same person. Gu Ling Wuji frowned and said with a smile, at that time, I was thinking that since it's the same person, then isn't this person the Beacon Emperor of the two sects? How could there be any struggle for the Beacon Emperor? Now, it seems that the Soul sect's prophecy was wrong. The two Beacon Emperors have already met. Isn't it absurd to say that it's the same person? After saying that, Gu Ling Wuji couldn't help but shake his head and laugh. He felt that he was too absurd to actually believe in such nonsense. However, in the next moment, Gu Ling Wuji realized that Nie Tian's expression had changed. His expression slowly stiffened, as if he was thinking about something. Lord Beacon Emperor, what's wrong? Gu Ling Wuji sensed that something was wrong. His heart that had just calmed down became anxious again. Nie Tian's gaze was deep, and he didn't speak for a long time. Lord Beacon Emperor, could it be that you and the Beacon's Emperor are really related? Seeing this, Gu Ling Wuji suddenly had a bad premonition, and his voice was trembling. Nie Tian took a deep breath and finally opened his mouth, telling him about the matter between him and the Devil's Knight. After listening to Nie Tian, Gu Ling Wuji's expression immediately changed. He took a deep breath and was speechless. Demon Knight was derived from the body of Nie Tian. It wasn't wrong to say that the two of them were the same person. And from Nie Tian's narration, there was indeed a predestined entanglement between him and the Devil's Knight, and there would definitely be a battle of life and death. Bit by bit, the prophecy of the Soul Sect was all correct. Then didn't this mean that Nie Tian would die in the hands of the Devil's Knight in the struggle for the Beacon Emperor? Please remember this book's domain name. Biaoshu.com. Chapter 44-48. For a moment, Nie Tian and Gu Ling Wuji didn't speak. The atmosphere was dead silent. Senior Gu Ling, I don't believe in fate, I only believe in myself. After a long time, Nie Tian spoke in a heavy tone. Fate is not decided by the heavens, man can overcome the heavens. Gu Ling Wuji's expression changed slightly. He nodded and didn't say anything else. Senior Gu Ling, I'll have to trouble you with Tang 13's matter. Nie Tian regained his composure and bowed slightly. The prophecy didn't mean much to him. Tang 13's problem was the most pressing issue. Yes. Gu Ling Wuji nodded. He suddenly thought of something and said, Beacon Emperor, maybe the Beacon's Emperor can save your friend. Devil's Knight? Nie Tian couldn't help but laugh bitterly. He helplessly told Gu Ling about the fight between him and Devil's Knight. He also told him about how Devil's Knight was willing to save Tang 13 but wanted her to fight on his behalf. I see. Gu Ling Wuji frowned and fell into silence. He didn't think that the fight between Nie Tian and Devil's Knight for the Beacon Emperor would be decided by the so-called fight between gentlemen. This way, Nie Tian and Devil's Knight could be avoided. It was a good thing. However, this didn't mean that there wouldn't be a fight between Nie Tian and Devil's Knight. It was only a fight to the death for the Beacon Emperor. Senior Gu Ling, do you know where the stone statues in the sect came from? At this moment, Nie Tian thought of the Heaven Beacon's stone statues and asked, Stone statues? Gu Ling Wuji was surprised at first. Why are you asking about this all of a sudden, Beacon King? It's like this. When I was strolling around the mountain gates, I saw these stone statues and felt that they were a little strange. After a closer look, I realized that the stone statues were filled with life and spirit runes. Even the arrangement of the stone statues is arranged according to the formation, so I'm very curious. Nie Tian nodded and said. Gu Ling Wuji was a little surprised. He did not expect to find so much information from the stone statue. These statues have existed since the founding of the Heaven Beacon sect. After a pause, Gu Ling Wuji's eyes turned strange as he asked Nie Tian, Sir Beacon Emperor, do you know how many peaks there are in total? I don't know. Nie Tian shook his head. He really didn't pay much attention to this. 720. Gu Ling Wuji smiled and said, Among them, there are 52 lone peaks, 309 double peaks, and 50 odd peaks. Among them are 108 perilous peaks, and among the perilous peaks are 36 forbidden peaks. As he spoke, Gu Ling Wuji stared at Nie Tian and said, Sir Beacon Emperor, do you understand anything? These numbers seem to coincide with the acupuncture points of the human body. Nie Tian nodded. He naturally understood the hidden meaning behind Gu Ling Wuji's words. The human body had 9 yuan meridians, 12 meridians, and 720 acupuncture points. Among the 720 acupuncture points, there were 52 single points, 309 double points, and 50 odd points outside the meridians. Among them, there were also 108 vital acupuncture points and 36 death acupuncture points. The Heaven Beacon Sect's mountain gates were almost the same as the acupuncture points of the human body. This was clearly not a coincidence. That's right. Gu Ling Wuji laughed and leaped tens of thousands of meters into the sky. Nie Tian did not know what Gu Ling Wuji was going to do, but he immediately followed. Sir Beacon Emperor, what can you see from here? Gu Ling Wuji waved his hand and swept away the clouds in the sky. He looked down at the entire sect and laughed. Nie Tian's eyes were like torches, allowing him to see the entire Heaven Beacon sect. A moment later, his expression changed. He was so shocked that he froze on the spot, unable to react for a long time. Gu Ling Wuji already knew that Nie Tian would have such a reaction, so he wore a faint smile on his face. Not to mention Nie Tian, anyone who saw the entire Heaven Beacon sect would be shocked for a long time. Looking down from above, the entire Heaven Beacon sect looked like a giant lying on the ground. The 720 mountain gates were like the giant's acupuncture points, and the paths between the gates were like the giant's meridians. The entire Heaven Beacon sect was clearly a person. It was no wonder that Nie Tian was so shocked by such a shocking scene. Senior Gu Ling, are you saying that the entire Heaven Beacon sect was built according to the structure of a human body? Nie Tian finally reacted after a long time, but his eyes were still focused on the ground. With a closer look, Nie Tian found that the ridges and rivers between the mountain gates were like the bones and blood of the giant. They were all connected, giving off the feeling that this giant could stand up at any time. One had to admit that the Heaven Beacon sect's image was too shocking and impactful. Yes. Gu Ling Wuji nodded with a smile, then put on a mysterious expression. Actually, the overall structure of the Heaven Beacon sect is not as simple as it looks on the surface. Beneath the entire mountain range, there are also underground streams that symbolize the 9 elemental veins. This, Nie Tian couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air, and was momentarily speechless. A mountain with a human body was too terrifying. However, Gu Ling Wuji smiled again. Not only are there 9 origin veins, there are also 9 soul veins and 9 life veins. Nie Tian's pupils constricted. He was completely dumbfounded. It wasn't hard to build a human-shaped formation. As long as there was a rough outline, then the important parts of the human body were used as the basis, and the power of the formation was enough. In the past, Nie Tian had seen formations that used the human body as the basis, or were similar to the human body. However, this was the first time he'd seen something as large as the Heaven Beacon sect, so complicated and intricate that it even had origin veins, life veins, and soul veins. It was hard to imagine who created such a large and intricate formation. After a long time, Nie Tian's expression finally improved. He took a few deep breaths to calm himself down. It seemed that he didn't understand the Fengtian sect at all. If Gu Ling Wuji hadn't shown him, he would never have discovered this secret. But at this time, Gu Ling Wuji's expression was a bit strange. He hesitated for a moment before speaking in a low voice. Sir Beacon Emperor, I have seen the entire formation diagram of the Fengtian sect. Although it's only an incomplete part, it shows that there is something that represents the soul within the formation. Soul? Nie Tian's expression flickered again, and his eyes went wide. The Heaven Beacon formation was shaped like the human body. Not only did it have meridians, but it also had origin veins, life veins, soul veins, and even the soul. But how was this possible? The soul was formless and formless. How could it appear in the formation? Chapter 44-49. After a long time, Nie Tian calmed down slightly, but his eyes were still filled with shock. Gu Ling Wuji said, when I was young, he was very interested in the sky beacon formation. Unfortunately, his talent was limited and he could not comprehend the formation. Not to mention the sky beacon formation soul, He could not even find the lifeline and soul vein. Nyetian nodded and let out a long breath. He asked, "Senior, this sky beacon formation is so huge and exquisite. Who built it?" Such a huge sacred formation was far from comparable to the vast cloud sacred city's protective formation. Furthermore, this formation was shaped like a human body, so it was definitely not simple. "I do not know either." Gu Ling Wuji shook his head and said, "Some say that it was built by the first Beacon Emperor. Some say that it was left from the primeval era and the first Beacon Emperor brought some formation masters to repair it. Some say that the formation was formed from the body of a fallen giant. Anyway, there are many different opinions and no conclusion." Nie Tian could not help but smile and said, "If this formation was formed from the body of a giant, then this giant is too big." The entire Sky Beacon mountain range was thousands of miles long. Could there be a giant that was thousands of miles long? Not to mention the primeval dragons, even the legendary primeval Cloud Kuan did not have such a huge body. "Lord Beacon Emperor, let's go down." Gu Ling Wuchi let out a faint smile and waved his hand, summoning clouds to form a natural barrier around the Sky Beacon mountain range. "Senior, the secret of the Sky Beacon formation has not been discovered yet. It should be because of the clouds, right?" Nie Tian could not help but ask as he followed behind Gu Ling Wuji. "The clouds are only a small part of the reason. The real reason is the Sky Beacon formation itself." Gu Ling Wuji laughed and said, "The special formation runes in the Sky Beacon formation can affect a cultivator's 5 senses. Ordinary people cannot see through the Sky Beacon formation." "Then why can I see through it?" Nie Tian asked curiously. "Because you have the Beacon Emperor's mark." Gu Ling Wuji smiled and said, "Those with the Beacon Emperor's mark can ignore the Sky Beacon formation's influence." "I see." Nie Tian immediately understood and said, "Doesn't that mean that only the upper echelons of the Fengtian sect know about the Sky Beacon formation?" "Yes." Gu Ling Wuji nodded and said, "After all, the Sky Beacon formation is too shocking. It might not be a good thing if too many people know about it." Nie Tian nodded in agreement. Even he was shocked when he saw the Sky Beacon formation, let alone the others. When the two landed, Nie Tian calmed himself down and asked, "Senior, are these stone statues the runes of the Sky Beacon formation?" "You could say that." Gu Ling Wuji nodded and said, "The runes engraved on these stone statues contain a terrifying power. However, after so many years, no one knows how to activate the stone statue anymore." Nie Tian had a helpless expression. As Fat Cat said, the Fengtian sect did not know how to activate the stone statue either. What about the Soul sect? Nie Tian thought of Devil's Night and told him about how Devil's Night refined Yan Qing into a soul puppet. Gu Ling's face turned pale with fright after hearing Nie Tian's words. "Really?" Nie Tian nodded heavily. He saw it with his own eyes. How could it be fake? Moreover, the formation that Devil's Night used was very similar to the Sky Beacon formation. They should be the same type of formation. Before the Fengtian sect split, those who knew about the Sky Beacon formation were all from the Soul sect. Gu Ling Wuji's expression darkened and said, "The Soul sect cultivates the heavenly path soul lattice, and their mental strength far surpasses ordinary people. Most of the Soul sect elders are very accomplished in the Tao of formations and Tao of pills. When the Soul sect left, they should have taken a lot of research materials about the Sky Beacon formation with them. After so many years, it is not strange for the Soul sect to have some understanding and breakthroughs in the Sky Beacon formation." Nie Tian deeply agreed and said, "Devil's Night is the Beacon's emperor and has 9 soul veins. His mental strength and divine soul are both at the peak level. With his comprehension ability, he might have really comprehended the Sky Beacon formation." Nie Tian suddenly remembered that when Devil's Night came to the sky above the Sky Beacon mountain range, he only took a glance and left. Now that he thought about it, Devil's Night was most likely in the Sky Beacon formation. It was just that at that time, Nye Tian did not sense anything and did not see the sky beacon formation. Gu Ling Wuji nodded silently with a look of deep worry on his face. If Devil's Knight could control the sky beacon formation, then he would have a huge advantage. If that happened, Nye Tian would not be able to compete at all. Nye Tian didn't think too much about it and instead asked, "Senior, do you have a way to strip the soul patterns from the statues?" "About that, I has not tried it before." Gu Ling Wuji was stunned and said with a puzzled expression, "Why is Lord Beacon Emperor suddenly asking about this?" Nye Tian did not hide it and said, "When Tang 13 and I examined the stone statues earlier, Tang 13 had a strange feeling about the runes on the stone statues. So I guess that the soul grid runes on the stone statues can help him suppress the soul of the Yellow Springs." Gu Ling Wuji's eyes became hot and he said with joy, "That is a good idea. Why didn't I think of it?" The soul grid runes on the stone statues were left behind by generations of Fengtian sect experts and possessed extremely strong divine soul power. If he could activate the divine soul power contained in the soul grid runes, he might really be able to suppress the soul of the Yellow Springs. "Alright, let's go and try it now." Before Nye Tian could say anything, Gu Ling Wuji could no longer hold back and rushed out excitedly. Nye Tian immediately followed and the two came to a stone statue outside the mountain gate. Gu Ling Wuji looked at the stone statue in front of him and took a deep breath. He pressed one hand on it and released his divine soul power, wanting to forcefully strip the soul grid runes. What a strong divine soul power! Nye Tian felt the aura on Gu Ling Wuji and was instantly shocked. He did not expect Gu Ling Wuji's divine soul to be so terrifying. Judging from the aura, it seemed to be not much weaker than Devil's Knight. After a while, Gu Ling Wuji raised his palm and a mysterious light surged in his palm. It was a soul grid rune. "It's off!" Nye Tian's eyes were burning with joy. He did not expect Gu Ling Wuji to really strip the soul grid rune from the stone statue. Gu Ling Wuji chuckled and put away the soul matrix rune before he said, "I'm one of the few in the sect who cultivates both the fate and soul matrices." Nye Tian was shocked. He did not expect Gu Ling Wuji to cultivate both fate and soul. "It's a pity that I does not understand the soul grid rune on the stone statue and can only strip it off directly." Gu Ling Wuji frowned and said, "This method is too barbaric and consumes a lot of the divine soul. With my ability, I can only strip a few runes at one time and I cannot guarantee the completeness of the rune. It's really embarrassing." "Senior, please don't say that. It's already very good to be able to strip the soul grid rune." Nye Tian smiled and said excitedly, "Why don't we try now and see if this soul grid rune can suppress the soul of the Yellow Springs?"